Cool.
Hey.
How's it going so far? 4 days in. Getting there? It's gonna get way harder. How's this guy over here doing, Jeff? Not bad? He's okay? I just wanted to share like a quick anecdote with you guys from my professional life that happened last Friday. You'll be able to relate to here in the next few weeks. So last Friday, I blocked out my whole day. Like didn't take any meetings, made sure not to schedule meetings, so I could write code all day. I could really focus and not launch stuff out. And so, come 8:30, start plugging away on this one issue in particular. Next thing I know, it's like 4 or 5 o'clock. I've made no progress. I've gotten nowhere. I'm still stuck on this issue. I can't figure it out. I'm losing my mind, banging my head against the wall, going crazy. Take a step back, go out, go to happy hour, relax, sleep on it. Wake up the next day, within 5 minutes, I figured it out. It was the easiest thing ever. It was just a silly little thing, but I spent the entire day and I made no progress. And the reason I bring that up is, software engineering, software development, it's not about linear progress, right? I can't just set aside 5 hours and make 5 hours of progress, right? You're gonna get stuck, you're gonna go crazy, you're gonna run into obstacles. So, sometimes it's just important to take a step back, relax, just breathe, go do something else, go do something fun, kind of think about something other than writing code. And more often than not, that'll do the trick. So I just want to take a quick second. That'll never stop, right? You guys find that you'll encounter these obstacles throughout the course, you'll have issues, and then once you guys get gigs and you're doing this full time, that'll never stop. So I just want to let you guys know when you do encounter these issues and get frustrated. We all do. It'll never stop. But you'll get better at it, and you'll figure out how to optimize it. I just wanted to share that with you guys. And again, we're thrilled at seeing how things are going so far. And I know Jeff's an amazing teacher, so we're all very lucky to have him. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cool, guys. Just some really quick announcements here to run through. First being, so your first capstone touch point will be next week on the 21st. So if you haven't started thinking about what that looks like, feel free to pick my brain, Doug's brain, Jeff's, your other students, Slack, whatnot. So that first touch point will be the 21st. You'll basically just share the ideas you have, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns. So we'll just go around the room basically and everyone will share that. I'll give you a reminder next week as well, but start thinking about that over the weekend. You can either build your own projects or we're exploring a bunch of different nonprofits. Elizabeth over there. I know I'll get back to you on your nonprofit stuff. But we have a bunch of others in the pipeline. So if you're interested, just by show of hands, how many folks are leaning towards building their own project, just by a show of hands? Okay. And how many are leaning towards the nonprofits roads? Okay, cool. All right, thank you for that. So just as a heads up for the nonprofits, we're working through those, but as a backup, sort of start thinking of one that you might be able to do as well, just in case it doesn't work out. So just start thinking on something that you might be able to do in here as well for next week. So also just a quick heads up here, just in terms of those touch points, we do plan to also introduce something I didn't talk about the first time I talked about capstones. So roughly every 8, 16, and then 24 weeks into the program, so basically a third as we go here. In addition to the touch points, I think it'd be cool to have a little demo of what you've all done on your capstone so far, to sort of show off what everyone's doing. So more on that, but 8 weeks in, and then 16 weeks in, and then for the 24 weeks will be the last presentation you'll do for the capstones, and you'll be able to show off all the awesome work you've been working on over the 24 weeks. So is everyone okay with that? And that'll get you comfortable to sort of talking about your code and presenting and stuff. Yes?
So I have no idea what I would want to do if it was just something that I wanted to work on. So I'm just wondering if you have had a couple of examples of things that might have been appropriate, like even if there are things that we use that, I don't know, like do you have any examples or just ideas of what that might look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we do have in that capstone document in the Google Classroom, there's a bunch of links to different projects that have been done at Hack Upstate. And in addition, so we have the winning projects and also just like a listing of all the different ones. So I'd encourage you to look there. Those are all built in 24 hours. And at the end of the day, choose something that you're passionate on building and something that's realistic in those 24 weeks. So If you want more info, I'd encourage you to dig into those first, and then if you still have questions, certainly flag me now. But if you can think of it, it's a crazy idea. You can make it happen in 24 weeks.
Okay.
Any other questions just on the capstone stuff? Otherwise, I'll dive into some more exciting things. Cool. Next one here, just as a logistical thing. I know it's annoying here, but if you wouldn't mind uploading a profile picture, either in Slack or your Google accounts, just because we want to put all your pictures on our website. We sort of have some blanks here, so we have some folks filled in, some not. If you wouldn't mind, just take a selfie or take it on your laptops. That'd be awesome, just so we can get that rolling here. If you're comfortable with that, if you're not, just ping me. We can certainly talk about that. All right, that was the last logistical thing. The only other thing I had was we have all your Coworks memberships ready for you. So if you come up to the front of the room, you can come up right now or end the class. Actually, you come up right now and get them just so we don't forget. So Coworks memberships, everyone. This is whatever your access level you requested, you will have. The bulk majority of you had 24/7. So these should all be active. So when you head to the Coworks, you'll scan the door and you can get in. And you'll have a reliable spot to work. So huge thanks to Coworks for providing these. So grab one and yeah, hopefully you will enjoy your memberships. Yeah, so whatever the accurate one is, yes, that's your quiz.
And I found the front 9 to 5. And send me a note saying that I had it.
Yeah. Is there not one there for you right now?
No, just this one.
Okay, let me take a look into that in
Yes.
a moment here, but I'll get back to you. Cool. All right, that's all I had. Thanks, everyone. Any questions at all? Coworks, Capstone, anything?
What do you say everyone's parking? Strict place or drops me at the door? I'm actually struggling with parking right now.
Yeah, good question.
I'm not gonna shoot. Do they enforce parking?
Sorry?
Do they enforce parking now? Like you get to?
It's after 6.
It's atypical for them to get
They
after
stop
5:30.
around at 4:25.
So I think if you can find a spot on the street, great. But if you need to park, there is 2 garages. I think it should be only like $2 to $3 daily, with just for the 2.5 to 3 hours here. Any other questions, folks? Anything at all? Cool. So Eva, I'll look into the Coworks and get back to you. Before I begin and have Jeff here, I just want to say that Jennifer Tran unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but we do have Paul Kwoyelo joining us as a teaching assistant for today, and Cashley as well. So thank you both so much for being here. If you guys need help, flag them down. They'll be walking around and helping out and all that good stuff. So awesome. Doug and I unfortunately have to jet here in just a couple minutes, so we'll only be hanging out for like 10 or so more minutes here. But any other questions? Cool. All right, Jeff.
All right. It's Thursday. It's about 5:40 p.m. How's everyone's energy level? Oh my God, it's Thursday. Everyone, is it Friday yet? Did anyone get outside today? Beautiful, amazing. Hashtag not Syracuse outside. Okay, it's all mirage. It's all. I was just checking the news. There was like some kind of snowstorm happening in Denver or the Midwest or something. So I always like when snowstorms happen elsewhere. You get to like laugh at it. That's what the country does to you, us, half the time. Anyways, on Monday I mentioned that part of web development is mental health, and Doug just kind of picked up on it or explained his little story. What Doug did was he suffered for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, walked away from her project, decompressed, and came back to it the next day and solved it in 5 minutes. What really happens is you have 2 sides of your brain, not the left side and the right side, but you have like active state and deactive, or the subconscious, if you will. And you spend a lot of energy trying to solve problems with one side of your brain, your active state. You're actively trying to solve problems, and sometimes you just can't solve that exact problem. It gets too crowded with all these other things going on during the day, all these other distractions, all these time constraints, all these other thoughts about what am I going to eat for dinner tonight, etc. But when you walk away from your project and you decompress, what happens is your subconscious takes over, and it actually keeps working on the problems, even though you're not actively working on things. So when you decompress, you sleep, you wake up the next morning, what your mind is really doing is it's organizing all those thoughts, all those fragments your brain was being fragmented the day before, and your brain puts all the fragments back together, and that's why you have clarity first thing in the morning. You wake up, you do your ritual of, I don't know, getting ready for work, showering, breakfast, etc., and then you sit down to work, and you have that clarity, and all the fragments are in the right place. And it happened to Doug, it's happened to me 1,000,000 times. It's amazing what a 15-minute walk can do often. So I work at Syracuse University. Occasionally I'll get burned out around 2 p.m. For a couple reasons. I'll eat lunch and I'll go through that lull after lunch, the energy lull. Can't solve any problems in that lull. And I often get super frustrated, so I'll go outside and take a walk around campus, or at least around the building, get some steps in, and come back and I'll solve problems at 2:30 p.m. Lightning quick. It's just amazing. So if you ever feel like you're super stressed out and you're not solving X, Y, and Z, take a little break and you'll be surprised how fast you can solve X. And now there's no guarantees, okay? That doesn't mean you just get smart by walking around a building or downtown Syracuse, but it is nice to decompress. It's also just nice to get away from a computer screen. Okay, we code, we stare at these screens. I was mentioning last night how it wears down your eyes a lot. But what you should really be doing is getting up and walking around, talking to people, going to meetups, and getting that non-computer screen time in. You should clock, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 hours of non-computer screen time each week, whether it's doing something at a gym, doing a walk, going to a meetup, being social at a happy hour, or family time, or a dog walk, or walk someone's dog. Hey, heck, steal someone's dog, okay? No, can't do that. That's against the law. Let's not recommend. This is being videotaped, right? Oh my God, this is evidence in court. Oh, okay. I wanted to recap HTML. Finally, we got through all of HTML. We got a little backed up between the meetup on Tuesday night and doing some stuff Wednesday. But I wanted to I'm not going to reboot this project from complete scratch. I'll be a complete bastard if I did that. Hey, let's create another project folder, Starbucks 3000. Let's not go from complete scratch, but let's walk through the steps, mentally walk through the steps about what we did. I was pretending that I'm Starbucks chief marketing officer, or the chief marketing officer contacted me and gave me this design and said, we need this new menu up right away. This is the way we want it to look. Can you execute this? Can you bring this to life and get it up ASAP? So I was encouraging everyone to do the first mental step is really or physical step is to get a piece of paper and wireframe what you see in that design. Circle where the images are, circle where the headlines are. Start making notes of what the structure can possibly do. This diagram right here is just a diagram of HTML structure. We haven't done everything yet. We haven't done the article elements, but we did H1, H2, H3, and paragraphs and images. When you sketch this out, this is your roadmap. Okay, you don't have to think on the fly about what the exact structure is going to be. You can always revert and refer back to your wireframe. So we got into it, we installed VS Code, Visual Studio Code, nice free code editor by Microsoft. So far, what do you think of VS Code? So far, you've only used it for a few days, pretty good. I'm going to be showing you more and more features of VS Code one little step at a time. We downloaded files, we created a folder. Many different ways of creating folders on your computer. What was one way that we created folders on our computer? What was one way that we
on the desktop?
On the desktop, yeah. How did we do it?
With both fingers?
Both fingers, 2 fingers, 2 fingers. If you on your trackpad, if you just do 2 fingers, right click, you get the right click menu, and that's where you can choose new folder. That's also up in the file drop down. You don't have to right click, you can go to File, New Folder. Or if you get super fancy, you can see these keyboard shortcuts right next to any of these commands. And the keyboard shortcut for making a new folder is Shift, Command, N. That's a nice quick way of making a new folder. Okay. Where'd it go? Here we go. So we created a new folder. We opened up VS Code. And we immediately made a new file by going to File, New Document. And we saved it index.html. Can anyone remember the reason why we called it index.html and not bananas.html or menu. It's what was that? It's what the server looks for, exactly. If we were to upload this to a server, say we're going to upload it to starbucks.com into the root folder of the server. If someone went to starbucks.com, the server would try to serve up an index file first before any other file on the server. So that's why we often name them index.html. We downloaded some files from Google Classroom. We unzipped the starbucks.zip just to get access to the assets. And in that folder there was images, there was a logo, SVG file, and there was a Starbucks text file with all the juicy content. We opened that text file up, we copied it and pasted it into our index file. And then we viewed that raw content in the browser and we saw something like this. Ah! Right? A mess. What do we call that? What do we call that mess on the left? A paragraph. Yeah. No, actually, no. It's not even a paragraph. Raw content. Raw, unstructured content. We are providing the browser with 0 instructions on how to structure that content. So this is where HTML steps in. I've been defining to you that HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. That's the technical definition, but the real definition is HTML is a set of instructions telling the browser how to structure and format the content. And we got into a little bit of HTML, opening H1, closing H1. And when you view it in the browser, it gets rendered. You don't actually see the elements in the browser. You see rendered content. And we jumped back and forth between the browser and our code. And we were building H1, H2, H3 paragraph. But what we're really telling the browser to do is start something, stop something. Start a headline, stop a headline. Start a paragraph, stop a paragraph. At a root fundamental level, that's what really HTML is. Instructions to the browser. What else does HTML do that I've been talking about subtly throughout our lessons? Yeah, it structures our content, but doesn't the HTML communicate to something else and assigns value to the content? What am I talking about here? Search engines, perfect even, yeah. Your HTML is important for search engine optimization. I'm going to talk more about that tonight. But the fact that we put Starbucks espresso beverages in an H1, we just told Google that this is the most important headline on our page. Typically, it's your page title. Can anyone remember what other element we used yesterday that paired together nicely with an H1 that really told Google in a search engine that this is the main title of the website? Title, yes. I just let it slip. So we're going to be doing all sorts of elements that influence what's called the semantic value of our content. By wrapping elements around, you're applying value. Yes, you're applying formatting, but you're also applying semantic value. And we did H1, H2, H3, H4. We didn't really do H4, H5, H6, but we did paragraphs and all that fun stuff. We marked it up, and we really got into it. Okay, so we had a victory. And I don't need to review these questions. We've been reviewing them a lot. We got into the images. Just by putting the IMG element into our document, that didn't do it. That didn't actually work correctly. We're giving the browser instructions to load an image, but what else did we have to provide to actually make that image work correctly?
Source.
Yeah, source, and what else? Okay, the source, and that defines the location and the file name. What else did we do? Alt? Alt, yep. More importantly, what we have to really do is provide the browser with HTML attributes. Sometimes the element itself does not get the job done. What other element did we do? What element was it?
Oh.
A.
The A, yeah. What does the A stand for? Anchor, yeah. Anchor elements don't work by themselves. They need the hyperreference attribute. You're going to come across many elements that need a little bit of extra information about the elements. So images is a perfect example. You need to have the source, and we define the source. Eva, with an E.
My mother's German, so say Ava.
Well, I know. I mix it up all the time. Anyways, she had a mini issue with her project. She went home last night and tried to make Starbucks 3, which is awesome. And she created a folder, and she created index3.html, put it in that folder, and then she went to our other Starbucks project, copied all the images, and she pasted it all into the root folder. Let me demonstrate exactly what she did. I'm using you as an example, as a learning mechanism here. Careers in Code, Module 1. Don't do this, but watch. So she was awesome. She made a Starbucks 3 folder, and pretend that this is index 3, but she made an index file perfectly with all the content in there. She went to Starbucks 2, went to the images folder, selected all, copied it, and came back to Starbucks 3 and just pasted. Okay. Any problems? Do you see any potential problems that's going to happen in how it relates to what we're doing right now with images? If I go back and look at this slide about images, what's a problem that's going to happen in that Starbucks 3 folder? Yeah. Okay, so this is one thing you're going to get burned on 1,000 million times throughout this 24-week experience. You're just going to throw files together and expect the browser to magically know what you're referencing to. In that index file that I've highlighted right now, that's where I have the image element, and that's where I'm specifying images/starbuckslogo.svg. The images, that code, if I point to it right here, where my mouse is right here, it's starting wherever this index file is relatively located on your computer. So this index file is inside Starbucks 3, so it's going to start there, and then look for the images subdirectory. It won't read your mind. It won't say, oh, there is no images folder, so I'm going to look elsewhere. It's very literal, if you will. And I've made that mistake, and I think every developer has made that mistake by moving around files and not necessarily keeping track of the relative linking that happens. SVGs, what happened with our SVGs when we put them in? When we put that Starbucks logo, what happened to that SVG? Boom, yeah. It'll be as big as it possibly can until it's told otherwise with some more information. At a very, very basic level, what we did was we inserted the width attribute and set it to 100 pixels. And just by putting width equals 100, that actually means pixels. It's assumed that it's pixels until you tell it otherwise. Tonight, we're going to get rid of the width attribute and substitute it with CSS. And we're going to control that with a style sheet. And we went all the way down our document, and we inserted 10 coffee images. And it was fun the first time, kind of fun the second time, and then it was work the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th time. But I showed you how to speed it up a little bit, so we didn't just keep retyping the same image over and over again. We copied and pasted the same image, and then we had a little fun just by changing the value of the image, and I try to keep the file names very short and simple. Maybe you can glean a lesson from that. Don't have complex image names. Don't have box123-a.jpg or something like that. Have the names of your files, literally kind of like have them describe what it actually is. It'll make your life easier, and it'll make everyone else's life easier. And as a sub-note to that, I kind of believe that Google likes file names nicely named. If it sees Starbucks-logo.svg on your website, Google's going to be like, that's probably the logo for Starbucks, and it'll serve it up into Google Images correctly. More importantly, the alt attribute will get the job done, and that's what we got into accessibility. All right, so we got into hyperlinking. We don't need to talk about that too much, but it does need that hyperreference attribute, that destination. And I showed you how to wrap it around an image, wrap it around text, and really that whole A anchor element really means start hyperlinking, stop hyperlinking. You can wrap it around anything you want to. It could be an image like this slide. It could be a piece of text. It could be an entire paragraph. Hell, it could be your entire website. Don't do that. Don't ever wrap a giant A tag around your website, but I think technically you can. That'll be cheating, okay? Don't cheat like that. I showed you how to open up the link in a new window, or a new tab that is, and that's one additional attribute inside the anchor element, and that's the target attribute. Target equals _blank. Now, I made a little note. How can I try to tell you, can you open it up in a new window versus a new tab? Do you have that ability to have a new window or a new tab? No. The answer is no. That's actually up to the user's browser preferences. It used to be always new window, blank always meant new window. Well, then we went through that whole pop-up ad phase where everything was a pop-up, and our browsers now block pop-ups no matter what they are. And they also prompt you, do you actually want to open a pop-up? Ever seen that up in the URL bar? You got to manually click on that. So now everything's just a tab until told otherwise with your user's preferences. Boom, victory. Okay. W3C, what do? I have the answer right in front of us, but what do? W3C.
Set standards.
Set standards for who? For whom?
Coders.
Coders, yeah, developers like us, and who else? Browser companies, yeah. So they talk to Apple Safari, they talk to Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and they tell the companies, you need to follow certain standards because we're making developers follow certain standards. We're trying to bring the web to its fullest potential. That's actually their motto, to bring the web, to bring the internet to its fullest potential. So one of the guidelines that they say for us developers to follow is every HTML document, while they're complex or very simple, needs to have 4 basic elements, and that was the HTML, the head, the body, and the title. The HTML is a giant wrapper. It kind of just tells the browser that all the stuff inside this document is in HTML. And it's kind of obvious because the file is often called like index.html. Already has that extension, but sometimes certain browsers, certain devices need that extra information. This just makes it more strict, if you will. The head section. Head section contains all the brains of the website. What did we put into the head section yesterday? Meta. Elements about the character set, another thing coming down the road. All your meta elements are going to go into your head section. What else went into the head? The language. Nope, the language went into the HTML element. What else? The title. The title, yes. And that's the fourth element. But opposite of the head, opposite of your brains is your body, and that's everything that the user sees in the browser. I like to think of the head as the brains, literally pointing to my head, the brains of the website, and then the body is literally everything that the user sees in the browser. And then the title element. The title element is super important for a few reasons. Can anyone name one of the few reasons why your title element is super important? What is it? First of all, what does it do in general? When I put Starbucks coffee company or espresso beverages into that title, what did that do?
Shows up in like the tab.
Yeah, labels your tab. If I minimize that tab, let me flip out of this. If I minimize my tab, let me just open up my index from yesterday. Okay, yeah, it labeled the tab up here, but also when I minimize the screen and I hover over one of the windows, look, it's in the bottom right corner of my screen. It's shown me the title element of my minimized window. Where else does that title show up in the UI of your browser? Where else can you see title elements? The history, yeah. The history is really just a list of title elements of all the websites you've been to. If I bookmark this website, don't look at my bookmarks, there's a big sloppy mess. The bookmarks capture the URL of the website and the title elements, and it displays your titles all over your bookmarks or your favorites or whatever. So it's good for that on a basic browser user experience. What was the real true reason why the title element was super important? Search engine optimization, yeah, title. Google says, whoa, Jeff put espresso beverages, Syracuse, New York, Starbucks, coffee company. This whole website is probably about coffee, about Starbucks. And I got a little sneaky. I was telling you about what's called local SEO, local search engine optimization. If you work for a client who needs to compete with other businesses in the given area, like think about all the coffee shops in Syracuse. You got Cafe Kubal, Strong Hearts, obviously Starbucks, other ones I can't think of off the top of my head. What else? Dunkin' Donuts, delicious Dunkin' Donuts. What else? Recess, yeah. I was running a scenario through you guys. You know, pretend you're a visitor in Syracuse. You stayed at the Marriott right across the street from the Tech Garden. You wake up the next morning, you want your first cup of coffee. Let's pretend Cafe Kubal is not located in the lobby. but you might open up your phone and search for coffee. What Google does is after you type in coffee into your mobile browser, it often takes your geolocation, Syracuse, New York, and it kind of attaches it to the query a little bit. And it starts to serve up coffee results in Syracuse, New York. Well, what we did was we did espresso beverages, vertical pipe Syracuse, New York, vertical pipe Starbucks. What people often do is that they type in the subject like coffee or espresso. And then when Google picks up your geolocation, if you have the location in your title, you're almost helping Google figure out the location connection. There's other things that goes into geolocating your website. But often when a visitor is in Syracuse, they don't know you don't know Strong Hearts, you don't know Cafe Cobalt, you're not going to type that in. That's why the company title is the third place item. It's almost the priority order. It's the page title, the location, and then the company. I was telling you I worked on a website for a dentist, and I didn't do the design for the dental website. They brought me in to recode it and apply a content management system to it. So I coded the hell out of it, and I squeezed every bit of SEO juice out of it. And this website, this ugly website, went from page 6 of search results all the way to page 1, if not search result number 1, 2, or 3. My website, even though it's ugly, competes with Aspen Dental, or a big chain of dental offices in the entire country. It has more SEO power than that. So that just proves that Google doesn't care about how pretty your website is. It cares about the coding underneath it, the HTML, and some other things that we'll talk about in the future. But title element is super important. If you can have a nice clean H1 and a nice clean title, that is 2 major steps in the right direction towards enhanced search engine optimization. Any questions about that? Douglas, is that correct? Sounds good. Okay, great. We got into accessibility. Namely, we're working with the image element and providing the alt attribute. And that was important for a lot of reasons. Way back when your image couldn't load, for whatever reason, it would display the alt text. If you were alive during the BlackBerry era, BlackBerry devices were the first devices to show the internet on a mobile device, and it would load the content off of cell phone towers. Well, the cell phone towers were just moving so slow data speed wise, they didn't want to transfer images over those cellular networks, so BlackBerries blocked the loading of images, and all you would see is like red X's all the way down your content, and then you would just see your plain vanilla HTML headlines and paragraphs and all that stuff. But nowadays, it's beyond that. It's beyond the original purpose of the alt. What is the main purpose of alt? I mentioned it, accessibility. People with reading impairments, they'll use screen readers, and the screen readers will talk to them and literally read all the raw content of the website to the user. But when it hits an image, a JPEG, an SVG, it can't interpret pixels, or in an SVG, it can't even interpret code. It's going to rely on the alternate text. And what was a third reason why the alt attribute was super important? This is very subtle, not as important as accessibility. What's one theme I keep coming back to? Search engine optimization, yeah. The fact that I have Starbucks Coffee Company in this alt attribute, or if we have Mocha or Americano or any other coffee images, Google's gonna start serving that up in Google image search results. And so it's a nice way of enhancing a little bit your search engine optimization, your keywords. What helps is it builds a bigger footprint for SEO, a keyword footprint. The fact that Starbucks is mentioned here in the H1, the title element, some other meta tags that we're going to get into tonight. If you start seeing Starbucks all over the place in your document, Google's going to be like, this is probably about Starbucks, so I'm going to start serving it up higher in your search results. Okay, W3C also says if you're going to code at the HTML5 standard, you need to include 3 more instructions into your website. Now, listen to me carefully, 3 more instructions. I didn't say elements, I didn't say attributes, instructions, so a few more pieces of code. The first one was this main instruction, this doc type HTML, and that declares that everything coded in this entire website is at the HTML5 standard. It doesn't say HTML5, it's an abbreviation. I showed you that HTML4 declaration, right? Remember that doc type? That was ugly. And I told you about little Timmy at the conference who proposed to make the doc type shorter. It was just a hypothetical exaggerated scenario, but finally in HTML5 they shortened it to make it short and sweet. The second standard that you need to do is include the language attribute inside your HTML element. That helps the browser snap into the correct language. You don't always want your browser to guess what language your website is in, the content-wise. It could get it wrong, and they could switch the entire font set, displaying the wrong language or the wrong set of little characters that belong to a certain language. And the third standard was the meta element, not just any meta element, but one meta element that describes the character set to be Unicode 8-bit. And that describes the way that this file is being saved on your computer, what kind of encoding, what kind of format, and the way that when it goes up to the browser, up to the server will also store it and write it and serve it up in the right type of format. I showed you Wikipedia about UTF-8, right? That was an awful definition of what it actually is. So I want you just to understand the surface level definition of what Unicode 8-bit is. It's just the encoding on your computer and the encoding when the file is uploaded to a server. And then when the browser actually reads this, it kind of reads it in the correct computer encoding. Question?
If you're coding for a website that's a European website, for example,
Yeah.
.de for Germany.
Yeah.
Is the HTML code the exact same?
Yeah, all the elements.
That's what I figured.
If you're an international developer, you actually got to learn English elements. So if you open up any international website, open up the source code, it's all in the head, HTML, IMG, H1. It's universal, but the content inside the elements are obviously in the correct language. We ran our code through the validator. We went to the W3C, we copied our code, pasted it in, and it graded or scanned our code to give us the A-OK whether we're following the certain standards. So we had another victory. All right, so finally, whoop. By the way, did you like that review? Is that a nice little brush up? Are you feeling like you're an expert at HTML so far? That's great. CSS is the fun part, in my opinion. When I got into CSS, it was a game changer for me. Anyone can do HTML. A lot of people can do CSS, but for some reason, CSS became like painting to me. It was just applying fonts, applying colors, applying layout. It just gave me master control over the website. Okay, so CSS is not anything to deal with C, C#, or Objective-C, or any other little dense programming language. It just stands for cascading style sheets. Cascading, the term cascading means you can have a few different types of style sheets, and they kind of all overlap each other in a unique way. I'm not going to get into that right now. We're going to have one style sheet. And then the term style sheet is just a file that the browser is going to load, and it's going to read the properties and values that we declare about our different elements when we change background colors or fonts. All that stuff is coming from our style sheet. All right, so to get into this, we got to create it's an optional thing, but I recommend creating a new subdirectory in our Starbucks folder called CSS. And we're going to create a new file, and we're going to save that file as style.css, and we're going to save it into the Starbucks/CSS subfolder. We're going to keep our folder, our Starbucks folder, as organized as possible. We're not going to paste everything into the root directory of our folder. We're going to keep everything in nice, beautiful subdirectories. So a couple ways of doing this. One way, by the way, let me just trash Starbucks 3 so I don't get that confused. One way is go into your Starbucks 2 folder and create a new folder. I mentioned how to create new folders earlier, but I'm going to do the fancy shortcut. Why don't we try the fancy shortcut? Shift-Command-N.
Can I just stop you?
Yep.
Look at myself confused again. So is this in the Careers and Code Module 1, Starbucks 2?
Yeah, we're always in Careers and Code. We're always in Module 1 this week. Next week we're in Module 2. And all those two surface level folders are just purely for organization. So you're not saving things in your downloads folder, your documents. We're trying to keep them in a central area. Let me just trash that folder for 1 second. So here's Starbucks 2. I see my images directory. I see my index. If I just click in this white space, nothing happens. But now I can do Shift-Command-N, and it builds me a new folder. I'm going to keep it lowercase CSS. Does that make sense? Not too bad. Other ways of making the folder, by the way, is just you can two-finger click in that white space. You can go to New Folder, or you can also go to File, New Folder at the very top. Okay. In VS Code, there's a way of making that file. Let me just shut down VS Code for 1 second. In my opinion, the best way of opening the entire folder for Starbucks 2 in this case is to, is there a way to do just right click and, no, okay. In my opinion, the easiest way is open up VS Code first. Open up VS Code, go to File, go to Open, browse for Careers in Code Module 1 Starbucks 2, and just open up the entire Starbucks 2 folder. Just click Open, and what happens is VS Code opens up the File Explorer on the left, showing you what you have open, but it shows you Starbucks 2, and it has index.html ready to go. And it shows you the CSS subfolder, the images subfolder. Always collapse these folders. Don't keep them open because it really crowds. Like if you have images open, look at all this. It's just pushing everything down. Let's collapse that. But yeah, from this File Explorer, you can actually create new files and new folders. I showed you how to do that a couple days ago. Question? Yeah. All right, so in my opinion, the easiest way to open a folder in VS Code is to open up VS Code itself first, and then go to File, Open, or Command O on your keyboard. Then you browse for, I don't know, for me it's Desktop, Careers in Code, Module 1, Starbucks 2, and stop there. Just Starbucks 2 and go down to Open. And it opens up everything nice and clean. Did that work? Are we becoming better at file navigation, folder navigation? Right. All right, so we made the CSS folder. We need to make a new file, a blank new file, File New, Command N, if you will, but you can go to File, New, Command N, new blank file, but we're going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to put it into the CSS folder, and we're going to save it as style.css. So select your CSS subdirectory and name this blank file style.css. All right, nothing happens, but we just put a file into that subfolder. Look at Starbucks 2, CSS subdirectory, style.css. Images subdirectory with all sorts of JPEGs and stuff. And then index.html is on the root directory. Technically, you know, CSS is a brother of images, and images is a brother or sister of index.html. They're all in the same surface root directory. So now when we make references in the index.html, we can always say, you know, /images or CSS/ or something like that. In the style sheet, let's make our first style. Ready? Without knowing anything too much about CSS, granted you did a little bit in Code Academy, but here comes the body element. And we're going to change the default background color to yellow. And I did not make that box of the yellow. VS Code will auto-render and give you a little preview of what that color looks like. So type this out with me like this. Ready? Body, curly brace, curly brace. Stare at that for 2 seconds. Do you have the 2 curly braces? I'll explain the curly braces in 1 second. And then type out background hyphen color, colon, yellow, semicolon. I'll explain the anatomy of the style sheet in 1 second. I'm going to go back to my browser in Chrome and hit refresh. And nothing happens. Wah, 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 wah. Any guesses why I don't see yellow anywhere? Fundamentally.
You didn't link the HTML with the
Yeah. I didn't link the style sheet to my index file. Just because you have a style sheet doesn't mean the browser knows that you want to load it in there. You need to be very explicit. You need to give it the instructions, the HTML instructions on how to load in the style sheet. Okay, so we have our style sheet ready to go, just the browser doesn't know how to suck it in. Here comes the process of getting this into the browser. We're going to go up to the head section. I'm going to put this after our title, but it's going to still be inside the head section. We're going to use the link element. If I hit save and refresh right now, nothing happens. The browser's like, okay, Jeff, you just told me to link to something, but you didn't really tell me to link to what. And so we need what? We need attributes inside here. We need two attributes in particular, the relationship and the hyperreference. I wish it was source, but we'll get to that. Two attributes to make it work correctly. The first attribute here is relationship. You're about to tell the browser, go load this strange document and bring it in. The browser is going to be like, okay, I have I'm looking at this document. What is it? How am I supposed to use it? What purpose does it have? What relationship does this document have to me being the browser? And you've got to identify that this strange document is a style sheet. And then the browser's like, oh, style sheet. Oh, that makes sense. It's called style.css. But the browser, it could be called bananas.css. It doesn't know that it's a style sheet. You think it'd be implicit, but you need to be explicit, if you will. It's not implied. Hyperreference, it's much like your image source. Where is it located and what is it called? Well, browser, go to my CSS folder and grab style.css. Another advantage of opening your folder in VS Code is this. When you open up the folder, VS Code starts to become aware of all your little pieces in your project folder. So if I type out CSS/, it starts to suggest files in that folder because it's aware of what's going on in my project. You can always hit tab to complete it if you want to. You get lazy like that, but I always type it out myself. So browser, just like the images folder, browser, please go into the CSS subdirectory and grab a file that I called style.css. Save. If I go back to the browser and refresh, Command R, yellow should now blind you. And it should work. If it's not working, there could be a couple things amiss. And I have this mistake all the time. First of all, I would just check, did you type things correct in the style.css document? Did you type body correctly? Notice body doesn't need the greater than less than signs. You just need the name of the element that you need to modify. Did you spell background color correctly? Background hyphen color. Do you have a colon between the property and the value being yellow? Semicolon is optional right now. And then do you have the curly braces correct around it? I'll explain why the syntax is important in just a little bit. The biggest thing that's probably wrong if you're not getting that style sheet. Oh, sorry, one thing. A second thing to check is, where did you save it? You know, I did a file save as, and I want to make sure, am I inside Careers and Code? Am I inside Careers and Code, Module 1, Starbucks 2? Did I put it into the CSS subdirectory? And yes, I can see that it's in style.css, or it's in that CSS folder, and I'm going to just quickly replace it. So if it's somewhere else, if you just saved it into your downloads folder or your desktop, it's not going to work correctly, mainly because of the link. The linking will be broken. And probably the culprit of things not working is just a little bit bonkers in your link. And watch how I clean this up a little bit. Look how clean this link looks when you put it on individual lines. This doesn't hurt code. It doesn't hurt the browser by hitting return between your attribute value sets. And now you can really judge, did I spell style sheet correctly? I make a typo all the time. I call it siddle sheet. Okay, I put the Y before the T. My fingers just type a little too fast. And then the CSS subfolder / the exact name of the file. I called it lowercase style.css. I've had many students in the past get fancy and they call it stylesheet.css or style with a capital S. And what's it called? The casing matters. It's case sensitive. So here's a rule of thumb for all your files in the future. Keep them lowercase. Don't ever capitalize anything unless you have a specific purpose. When you get deeper into JavaScript, some developers like to capitalize certain files because they're a class or a big component or something like that. It's special. But if it's just a normal file, just keep it lowercase. It'll simplify your life times 1,000,000. Did we get yellow? Anyone not get yellow?
I've forgotten how to get it.
Okay. Let's stand by. Let's take a break and let's figure it out. Help your neighbor, by the way. Help your neighbor a little bit.
Index.
And if you got yellow, you can just sit back and relax and be like,
Okay. You probably didn't save the style sheet. Click on this.
oh, I see a capital S.
Go back to index.
Caitlin, can you see her mistake?
There's no space.
Well, that's a good one too.
And
Right now we have students troubleshooting other students. It's beautiful.
can you go back?
Kelly's just hanging out over there. What's going on? Did you get yellow?
No space.
Woo! Nice. It's beautiful. Not really. It's not really.
Yeah. Oh, style. You know style. Sorry,
Case sensitive.
Which one? Oh, the style, the name of the
Oh,
file?
yep.
Oh.
You're running through the right options though.
I was
Yep.
trying.
And then eventually it's like, oh, 5-6 layers deep.
I didn't finish
Let's
the
do it.
one
Let's
that
do
I-
a file save as. Save that style sheet again as lowercase style.css, and then you're going to trash the old one.
Get rid of that. Yep. Close this. Go. Wait. Just close. Close this.
File structure looks fine. Let's go back to your. You can pull it over here.
What's going on with that? It's a little weird.
Yeah.
It's open.
I just gotta move your finger over there.
Oh. Okay, let's look in that CSS folder. What's going on inside the CSS subdirectory? Okay.
Okay, click to It's in there. We just looked at it. This is Starbucks too.
And it's called style.css. Beautiful. Let's go back to VS Code. What do we got going on in body? Background -color, :yellow. Beautiful. Save. It's not saved right now. Hit Command S. Command S. Now it's saved. Now go back to the browser and reload. Hit Command R. Sometimes. Oh, there it goes. All right, so you did, Dana, you did body, background color, yellow, boom. And then you just jumped back to the index.html to do the link with me. You didn't follow through and hit Command S. I've made that mistake many times. Don't worry. Just kick me out. Just, I fail. I give up. Other problems? Got 99 problems, but a link ain't one.
Oh, we got the yellow.
Hashtag you're welcome. That's a terrible, terrible joke. Don't ever repeat that.
No. Just do the body.
What happened?
It got messed up.
Okay.
I know.
Oh, here comes. How we doing? Back row? Back row pretty good. Tim, good. All right. Got Gatorade back there. We got a whole supply, a whole armada of bottles back there. Better not be some adult beverages back there. Dana, Burger King, delicious. What are you doing? It's amazing. Love it. Making me hungry. I think my stomach is about to growl. All right. So before we go on in any project, you got to do this. You got to set up your HTML document. You got to set up a style sheet and just change something very basic like this. Literally, body, background color, yellow. I do this almost every day when I'm working in CSS and HTML. You need a link to it. And then you got to see it. You got to make sure you see that connection. Never assume that it's working. Don't just think you're an all-star at HTML and CSS and just blast through your project without even viewing it in the browser until like 60 minutes down the road. No. View it immediately within 3 minutes. I've made the mistake. I'm like, yeah, I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing. You get through and it's not working, and then all of a sudden you have to troubleshoot a tall style sheet. You have to decipher and troubleshoot a tall HTML document, and you just don't know where the mistake could have been. But by doing it right now, you can really isolate where the mistake was. You can look at the file. You can look at your code. You can look at the link. There's 3 things that could go wrong. You can look at those 3 exact pieces. All right. Cool. All right. So I want to make. I want to control the logo image with CSS. I want to talk about just controlling typography first before we get fancy with images. You can select any element from your HTML document. All you got to do is specify the name, and then you can list out properties and values that you want to change. For right now, the H1 is Times New Roman. I'm going to make it font family Arial. By default, the browser just assumes you want everything in Times New Roman, and usually you don't. It assumes that you want your H1 to be like 36px or something. We're going to be like, you know what? I'm going to make it 48px, something big, obnoxious. And I'm going to make it red. S's and G's, shits and giggles here. Do not take this stuff as like literal design advice. We're just playing here. We're just getting this off the ground. We're using crayon box colors. Save, refresh, and then look at that. It's working. But look at my browser versus my code. Why do I have purple underline around the word Starbucks and I see red everywhere else? Any guesses why that's happening?
Starbucks is still linked.
Starbucks is still linked. I demoed yesterday. I put an anchor element inside the H1 element, and I hyperlinked just the word Starbucks. And this shows you that the anchor element inside an element will have cascading power over something specified for the H1. That purple and that blue link will have more power inside that element. We'll control that in the future. Here comes an H2 element. H2 elements are the coffee titles. And we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to make them Georgia. We're going to make them, I don't know, 28px in color green. Basic typographic properties. We are saying, hey browser, please select the H2 element, and I want to cascade on top of the defaults. I want to cascade over font family Times New Roman and replace it with font family Georgia. I want to replace whatever the H2 currently is with font size 28px. I want to replace black. I want to cascade over color colon black with color colon green. Save. Refresh. Oh, wait for this. Look at this. Oh, look at it. Just so beautiful, so sexy. Hashtag I know you're impressed. Hashtag why am I using hashtags? I apologize. H3s are the prices. I'm going to go back to Arial, smaller font size, and a silly color of gray. Doesn't make any sense. I know, it looks terrible, but it's nice just to swim a little bit in CSS before you start dialing in real properties. And here comes the paragraph, the P element. Right now it's Times New Roman. I'm going to control this to be Arial. Font size 16px and color colon brown. That's a spicy meatball. That's not a meatball whatsoever. Kind of, could be. Hopefully you see a little repetition there, a little font family, a little font size, a little color. A little font family, a little font size, a little color. You don't have to put those properties in that exact order. You can have font family go last and font size go first. Okay, they don't have to be alphabetical. Okay, but here's the catch. Sometimes order does matter. If you accidentally do this with the P tag, before I hit save and refresh, which one wins? Which color wins, brown or orange?
Brown.
Why is that?
I'm just guessing.
You're just guessing. Okay, complete guess. Anyone have an educated guess? Dominant. Ah, that's it. Top to bottom. If the computer reads this document from top to bottom, which it does, which one wins?
The last one.
The last one, yeah. The browser's like, woo, P tag, Arial, perfect. Font size 16, woo, color brown, puts it in. Oh wait, color orange. I'm gonna put that in. Whatever comes last has cascading power. That's the term, cascading style sheets. Now you don't ever put two colors in the same chunk, the same style rule like this. Just be very explicit. Just keep it organized. Save, refresh. Okay, I've been mentioning the word cascading a few thousand times already, and I said in doing all this, hey browser, I want to cascade over Times New Roman and replace it with Arial, or a basic font size with 18 or color gray. This is the browser actually puts in its own defaults, and I'm in Chrome. Do we all have Chrome installed? Dana, do you have Chrome installed? Okay, if you don't have Chrome installed, open up Safari and Google search Chrome or Google Chrome. And I want to install this. I want everyone to install this if you haven't done this already. Chrome is a good, an excellent browser, but it's not anything better than Firefox or Safari or Edge. Some would argue, yes, it is. Probably on subtle, deeper levels, it probably is. I would say Chrome often updates itself a lot, which is nice in today's era of security and hacks and all that stuff. Firefox also updates itself a lot, which is nice. Yeah, it can be annoying, but it's nice to have a browser, an app, if you will, constantly update itself, adhering to the newest standards. That's what didn't happen years ago. This is why occasionally I'll come across someone that has IE6, Internet Explorer 6, still installed on their old PC. Okay, I'm looking at my parents. They still have their old PC. It barely operates or something, and it's still running IE6, 7, or 8 or something like that. All of that is obsolete, but it's still legacy. It's still lingering out there. But now, if you install modern web browsers, they constantly update themselves, and you don't even, it all happens in the background. You don't even see it happening, which is excellent. Anyways, go ahead and download if you haven't already, and make this your primary browser. But keep your other browsers on standby. You might want to also install Firefox on your Mac, and you already have Safari. You can't install Edge on a Mac. Not that I don't think you can. And it's nice to flip back and forth between all those browsers to make sure your code looks okay, your content is structured okay across all those different browsers. Dana, how's it going? Chrome? With that sound effect, open it up. Because in Chrome, and also Safari and Firefox, but Chrome, it's easy to right-click in your body of your browser and go to Inspect. Let me show you the difference between Page Source and Inspect. Inspect, bear with me one second, I got to put this back to its default location. This is what Inspect will do by default. It'll pop open this little shelf at the very bottom of your browser. And on the left side, it's going to show you the elements, basically your page source of what's going on in this browser. As I circle my mouse right here, you can see it highlighting the different elements. On the right side, it's showing you the active CSS being applied to this. And let me zoom in over here. If I click on that H2, and I'm clicking over here, and let me just crank this up just a little bit. What's happening is, I'm just trying to get this in the window. What's happening is the browser right here is loading in some defaults. display block, margin start, margin end, another start, font weight, bold. Also behind the scenes, you can't see it right now, there's Times New Roman being applied. But then look above this. H2, font family Georgia, font size 28, color green. Where's that coming from? That's coming from style.css, from line number 9. Look at this, style.css:9. It starts at line number 9. When you see the label over here, user agent style sheet, that's a fancy word for your user's browser style sheet, your defaults. You have no control over this. This is what Google Chrome is supplying. Google Chrome assumes you want your headlines to be bold and to have a little margin on the top and the bottom. But we're starting to cascade over that. Okay, it looks different. Let's see. It might look different.
I don't see each one.
Okay, open up the body.
Oh, there.
Open up, hit the little triangle. Yep, oh, no, careful. Little triangle.
Oh, there.
Touch the H2. Well, one of them, yeah. Boom, there you go, it's down at the bottom. Okay, so Eva's screen had a different orientation. You can click this little dot, dot, dot on the side menu, dot, 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 and change the dock side. And what I often like to do is to undock it. Look at this. I like to undock. By the way, everyone's seen inspection, period. Right click, inspect. And often it's a bottom shelf for Eva, maybe for you guys. It might be on the left or right side. You can just grab these windows and lift these panels up. Lift it up. And then open up the body, touch the H1, touch the H2. Touch it in this little element view, and then it changes the CSS. It shows you what CSS is being applied to that exact element. I like to undock this because it takes up room. Look at this, watch. This little dot, dot, dot. I click it. It means extra options about the inspector. And this option is what I like. Look at this little icon for undocking it into a separate window. I'm going to click it. And now it's its own little floaty panel that I can park off to the side. And even shrink this a little bit and get this up. And then I make my browser a little smaller. Now I can kind of jump back and forth and see what's going on. Professionally, in my office, I work on 2 screens. And quite often I'll have my browser, my yellow browser here, open on the left screen. And my screens connect to each other. And I have my inspector palette or my code open on the right screen, or vice versa. On a laptop, it's kind of tight a little bit. You got to manage the space. To my point, it's nice to undock the inspector and have it so you can move it around anywhere you want. Is that working for everyone? So it's a great way of seeing what is actually going on inside this website. Now I mentioned there's page source. If I right click and go back here, there's view page source. This literally just shows you the raw HTML going on inside this document, but it doesn't say anything about CSS. It just shows you raw HTML, basically what's from your index.html file that you've been authoring yourself. Okay.
And they just do that to help developers? Or?
Yeah, for developers. So watch this. If I go to newyorktimes.com, or any website for that matter, and I go to a specific headline, and I'm going to control click or right click on it, and I'm going to hit inspect. Well, I don't want everything. Hold on. Oh, go ahead. Inspect element. Opens it up, and I can come over here, make sure I'm on the H2 that I clicked on, and it's shown me right here all of the CSS that's being used. Now it's a little technical right now, but look at font weight. Wait, we haven't done that yet. Color, font size, different unit of measurement. We'll get to that. Line height, font family, New York Times. They have their own little custom typeface and margin properties. But you can see the CSS properties for anything out there. Remember yesterday I was talking about stack, front end, back end. Front end code is visible like this in the browser, but you can't see back end code this way. There's no way to get past that wall, so to speak, to see all the code responsible for serving up a page. Whatever's being rendered in your browser is accessible in this type of format. Let's not get too complicated.
And that's just for security reasons?
Yeah, security, yeah, because if you had access to the back end, that means you could obviously put money into your bank account, which would be beautiful. We need to do that lesson. We need to figure out how to hack in. Oh my God, this is recorded again. Can't. Oh my God.
I'll come in on Friday.
Yeah. Questions? All right. Let me get back to my presentation so I don't veer off the rails. I did veer off the rails a little bit. Let's go back. CSS, we made a subdirectory called CSS. We made a new file called style.css. Common question that I get a lot is, do you have to call it style.css? And the answer is no. You could call it bananas.css as long as you link to bananas.css. However, developers across the entire world, they just have a nice little simple standard of let's not make it complicated. Ever heard of the KISS principle? K-I-S-S? What does that stand for? Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah, let's just keep it style.css for the unforeseeable future, or for the foreseeable future, if you will. And keep it lowercase. Some terminology I want you to be familiar with. A CSS selector. A CSS selector is equivalent to what we typed out before the curly braces, like the body. We're selecting an element from the HTML to modify. But if you read a book or read a tutorial, watch a video about CSS, they're probably going to use the term selector. And it's just that term for whatever you want to select to modify. If I flip back to my style sheets, I have the P is a selector, the H3 is a selector, H2, H1, and body. I have 5 or 6 selectors in my style sheet right now. Property. A property changes a visual characteristic of the selected object, the selector. And there's many different properties in CSS that you could change. We're just changing background color to yellow, color to red, font family to Arial, etc. Okay, so properties. There's many, many, many properties. And when I inspected NewYorkTimes.com and I showed you that H2 headline, there was probably like 13 properties. You can have unlimited amount of properties inside those curly braces. We'll beef it up in just a little bit. Okay. Now, already so far in CSS, you're noticing syntax. You're noticing punctuation marks. Curly brace. Where the hell did that curly brace come from? Why is there a colon? Why is there a semicolon? It's because the browser needs to know what is a selector and what is a property and what is a value. So bullet number 1 here. Selectors do not require the HTML greater than less than signs, the carets, whatever you want to call them. You just often need the name of the element. The curly braces go after the selector. Okay, so don't put your H1 selector after a curly brace. It's going to start thinking it's a property. No, the selector always goes first. And the curly brace sets, the one curly brace set surrounds all of your properties and values. So if I flip it back and I have one curly brace set around all these paragraph properties here. That curly brace says, hey browser, everything about the P tag, the P element, is about to start here. Font family, font size, color, and then I'm done styling the P element. Please move on to the next selector and its selector and its properties and values. A colon, the dot dot, if you will, separates a property from a value, and that's super important because if I go back here and eliminate my colons, think about you being the browser. Which one's the property, which one's a value? It can't read your mind right now. It now thinks everything's just like gigantic hunk of a value. It actually doesn't even know what which one's which. So whatever comes before the colon is the property. Whatever comes after the colon is the value. And the last little bullet point is semicolons are required to separate property value sets, because there's some developers out there that love putting their properties values on one single line like that. And I say, don't do that. Okay, it's okay, it's organized. You can read it, but I would argue you can barely read that. You can barely see where one property value set begins before the next property value set begins. And the semicolon is important because if you do write it that way, watch what happens when I don't have semicolons. Well, how does it know? It knows that font family is a property because it's coming before a colon, but then Arial, wait a minute, this is the value. Wait a minute, font size, is this a value? There's no punctuation mark in between that. And then it hits another colon, and then the browser's like, okay, I'm confused. You haven't given me the clues about which one's which. So if you write things on a single column, a single line that is, you need that punctuation mark, and it doesn't matter. Okay, watch this. Even if I don't have a semicolon and I hit return, doesn't matter. The browser assumes that everything's on a single line, and it's going to start to mess all this up. So semicolons are required at the end of every line, so that it knows what's a property, what's a value, what's the next property, what's the next value, etc. Does that make any sense? Don't worry, you'll get burned. You'll forget a semicolon. You'll forget a colon. I bet you Doug earlier, he won't admit this, but maybe he forgot a curly brace or a semicolon or a colon in his code. It's probably not that simple. He probably had a complicated problem if he spent 5-6 hours deciphering what it was. I'm kidding. Questions?
Just is there a benefit in terms of file size if you don't?
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, you're actually, by hitting enter and even hitting tab here, you're adding extra file weight to this CSS document. But each enter key, each tab only holds like a byte or two. Okay, it's not a lot of space. However, if you're working for Netflix or Amazon or Facebook and you have a gigantic style sheet, you wanna just rip all that extra spacing out as much as you can. But you don't want to do that in your development CSS, your copy that you're editing. You want to let a compiler do that for you. It's actually it's called a minifier. You can take the style sheet and run it through a minifier, and it'll suck out all the extra characters that you don't need. It'll make the file as light as humanly possible. But don't edit, you don't want to read it because you don't want to do this. This is what a compiler does, or a minifier. And if I turn off word wrap, don't do this. If I toggle word wrap for 1 second, this is what a compiler does. Even gets rid of spaces. It like shrink wraps your entire CSS and makes it as light as possible. And then it even backs the p tag up against the other curly brace, and then etc. It can go all the way up. That's a terrible way of editing your code. You do not want to do that yourself. Let a computer do that for you. And it's very common practice to have a minifier service, a little code checker do that for you. We're not that fancy yet. So CSS, you got to get used to the syntax, and it takes a little bit. It takes a few mistakes. You're going to get burned. You're going to touch the stove a couple times. You're going to get burned, and then you'll eventually figure out that, ooh, I really need to pay attention to my curly braces and my colons and my semicolons. But now that you know the terminology, selector, property, value, now you know the purpose of the colons, the semicolons, and the curly braces. And okay, in this document, I forgot that I did it out of order. I was pretending that we hadn't linked it yet, and we're not seeing anything because so the problem in parentheses, we haven't told the browser to load the style sheet. Well, we did that just out of order. Here comes the link element. The link element, just like that, doesn't do anything. It needs the two attributes inside it, relationship and hyperreference. I explained what those are, but the relationship is, what is this document? What purpose does it serve? What relationship does this document have to me being the browser? Well, browser, this document is a style sheet. Please use it accordingly. Oh, the browser says, okay, that's right, yes. Oh, H1s and H2s and selectors and properties and values. Okay, now I know how to use this document. Hyperreference, where is it located? What is it called? I wish this attribute was source. It would make a lot more sense. But sources, the source attribute, like the image source, usually points to something internal in your project folder, and hyperreference often points to something external. You can actually load a style sheet from a different server altogether. Don't do it, but you could in the future. We might do it tonight, actually, for something else unrelated. But in this case, no, we're not going external. We're staying inside the Starbucks 2 project folder and just looking for the CSS subdirectory and grabbing a specific style sheet, style.css. We refreshed it. It worked. Bada bing, bada boom. We got a little victory. I am not giving out badges. I don't make that kind of money to produce and print stickers and everything, but it's nice to know that things are working. Never assume that that style sheet is working without changing something silly like background color of your body. Okay, we did a little color. We changed the H1, H2 in paragraphs. We changed the font sizes. We had some fun. We changed the font family to Arial or to Georgia. You can change it to other typefaces in the future, but let's stay super simple right now. All right, so we're going to wrap articles around our coffee items. Have we done this yet? No, we haven't done articles yet. So articles are an HTML5 element that tells a browser and a search engine that these pieces are groups. It doesn't mean a magazine article, it doesn't mean a news article, it means a group. So if I scroll down and I find Americano, granted I hit return on after my H1 for Starbucks espresso beverages, but here's my A tag for Americano, here's the image. I'm going to tab that in a little bit. And then A tag closes, H2, Cafe Americano, H3, price, paragraph. What I've highlighted in blue right now, this is a group. This is a set of related information. What we need to do is insert the article elements before it and close the article elements when we're done. And what this tells the browser and the search engine is that all the little pieces inside here are all interrelated to each other. Like that H2 belongs to that H3 399, and that paragraph, rich full-bodied espresso, belongs to the 399 and it belongs to the H2 Cafe Americano. The image, Americano.jpg, belongs to the H2, the H3, because it's all bundled together inside an article group. If we didn't have the article, like the second coffee, if you will, what often happens is Google has to guess that this latte headline belongs to the image called latte.jpg. It has to guess that this price belongs to this title, this paragraph belongs. It'll often guess it right because it's directly adjacent to each other, but sometimes Google can get it wrong and start archiving and indexing the content in a wrong format, in a wrong value system, if you will. But by putting an article element around it, you're now bundling information. And it's also democratizing your the values a little bit. Now you're super presenting all your coffee children equally to the search engine. Coffee children to the search engine. Okay, so copy opening articles and just go right down, speed it up and paste in opening articles. Now I'm opening about 6 doors here. I'm opening article doors. Make sure when you get down to the bottom, go back and close the door to your article children, if you will. So I'm going to type out one article, close. I'm going to copy it and go back upstairs and find the end of every article. After every paragraph, paste in close article. I don't want to keep these doors open. I got to make sure that I'm giving opening and closing instructions to the browser. One to open something, one to close something. And if you get a couple extra seconds, why don't you tab in the children elements inside the article child. Watch this, watch. I'm going to highlight all my children inside an article element and hit tab. VS Code can handle multiple line tabbing. So you don't have to tab single children at a time, single image, single H2. You can highlight everything and hit tab all at once. And if you want to detab, untab, whatever the fancy word for detab, it's shift tab. Makes it go backwards. So watch this. Tab, 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 shift tab, shift tab, shift tab. Can go backwards. So tab in. It makes your document more readable, more legible.
I have a comment.
Yes.
So the assistive readers, for people who can't see, you can press a special keystroke to skim the text on a page. So historically, knowing whether or not you jump from one section to the other, it relied on heading levels, and I see this as a more reliable way of discriminating which items belong to which group, because you can't always rely on people who are coding to do proper H1, H2, H3.
Next week sometime, I'll show you how to do a button called skip to main content. Ever see that on the programs? If you, a person with a reading impairment, not necessarily blind, but just someone who might not be able to use a mouse, they'll often on the keyboard hit tab to skip through all the links of a page, and then once they find a link that they want, then they hit return to go to the link. But if you've ever looked at a modern header with a navigation system in there, there's a lot of links, there's a lot of drop-down lists in a modern navigation system, and then if you have to tab through one of them one at a time, you can potentially be tabbing 36 times before you even get to the main content. So often you'll queue up a skip to main content link at the very top, and you hit return and it'll jump down to your main content. I'm going to show you how to do that, just not right now. But to your point, proper headings, headings that are very literal about what they are in the right hierarchy is important.
Just imagine being someone who's just relying on listening to everything. So if you're on a newspaper website, you'll literally have to listen to hundreds of links before you even get to the main content. So you're on the main page. If you want to go to sports, if there's not a skip to main content, you're listening to those same 100, 200 links before you can even get to main content.
Problems, questions. Okay, when you hit save and refresh the browser, nothing happens. But your document is now being grouped together nicely. It's now like 1% better search engine optimization wise, just a little bit. But now you have a nice styling opportunity. You can do something with the article elements. For example, go to your style sheets. Go to scroll down. No, actually, I'm going to scroll up between H1 and H2. I try to keep my styles in the order that they appear in my HTML document. So body came first, H1 came second, and then my article children are after that. So I'm going to squeeze in an article style between H1 and H2. And I'm going to say every article is going to have a little space at the very top of 10px. It's going to have a little space on the bottom of 10px. And here comes a funky property, border dash bottom 1px solid gray. I'll explain what that is. Just go ahead and put that in. Save, refresh. I love hearing the sound of keyboard buttons being pressed, the sound of productivity, and education, learning. I smell smoke. Yeah, okay, that's a few brains in the room, okay? We're burning a few brain cells. This is good.
You used to say that at drinking.
All right, so padding top, padding bottom. That means push up, push down a little bit within the article. So when I look at Cafe Latte here, right before that image, there's a little 10 pixel space. Let me zoom in a little bit. There's a little 10 pixel space, and then now there's a giant space after the paragraph, and there's something else invisibly going on that I'll talk about in 1 second, but at least there is some space. Space above, space below, space above, space below, and then the border property. There's a border along the bottom edge of every article element. And what you see here is 3 values, and this is what's called Shorthand Css. This is short for 3 properties. Now don't type this out, but if I wanted to type this out myself, I would have to do border dash, I can't remember the property for the thickness or the size. Radius, no. Spacing, style, top, no. Width, border width, that's it. 1px, border dash type, border dash style, border dash style. So don't type this. And then border dash color, colon, gray. Oh, that was a lot to memorize, okay? I don't even have that memorized. You can type things out manually like this. But CSS, the developers of CSS, gives you an opportunity to go shorthand. And if you type out 1px or solid or the color, you can get away with this shorthand, this abbreviated version. And I think the order does matter. But border dash bottom, you can go 10px. You can, instead of solid, you can go dotted. And instead of gray, you can go blue. Save, refresh. Oh yeah, look at that. The thickness of the border is 10px, it's dotted, and it's blued. It's so much, it's so better. You don't even know, you don't even know. I know you're jealous, you're so jelly. Can't believe I just used those words. I apologize. For the recorded audience, for the streaming audience, I apologize. Okay, often with, when I do border treatments, I try to stay as subtle as possible. So 1 pixel line, just a hairline, solid often. And okay, it depends on what's going on the website, but gray or a really light gray value is nice to use. I don't like to draw. I don't like to draw any attention to my separators between items. You don't always have to separate it, but it does assist the user to see chunks, to see visual groups. Without having the border, well, then the user, the human viewer, would have to make the distinction whether this image belongs to this headline and this price and this paragraph. But by putting little borders in between, you're now visually chunking these items together. Questions? Problems? Not too bad. Victory on some basic font styles and some box styles. All right, just to recap what we just did for the past few days, we learned how to structure content with HTML. We structured it for the potential use of CSS. We structured it, we told the browser what is a headline, what's a primary headline, what's a secondary headline, what's a paragraph, what's an image, what's a hyperlink. We did all that. We adhered to the W3C guidelines by putting in 4 basic elements: HTML, head, title, and body. We also adhered to their HTML5 standards with doc type, language, and meta character set. We're also following the guidelines of using alt attributes for every single image, purely for accessibility. We link to a style sheet so that we can change the default properties of our ugly type of our H1s and H2s and paragraphs, and even images. We'll get into that, and background colors and borders and all these visual things. Google does not care that I have a yellow background and a red type or green type. It doesn't care. It cares about how well structured and coded is the HTML. However, in the future, when we get into this next week with responsive web design, Google does care whether your website is mobile friendly or not. And there's a little piece of code that helps Google figure out whether something is mobile friendly. And we'll do that next week with all this stuff. There's much more we can learn and apply to CSS. You know, ever heard the term dry code, D-R-Y? Don't repeat yourself. How many times did I just mention font family Arial in my code? I could have repeated font family Arial for every single block. That is technically being repetitive. Dry means don't repeat yourself. So a lot of developers will declare a font family in the body element, and it says all my children content are going to be in Arial. And if you ever want to change it, all you would have to do is only change it in the certain spots you want to change it. You can then say all my elements, they're all going to use Arial, and then they only change once in a while, so that'll speed up things. How to publish this on the web? Well, eventually next week with your next instructor, Christy Pressler, you'll learn how to push this up to a server. You're going to push this up to GitHub next week. Tonight, after we take a break, we're going to learn how to get into layouts a little bit, and more about CSS and more about HTML. Next week, we're going to look into how does this look on a mobile device, tablet, and desktop, all the responsive stuff. Okay, that's the end of that first mega big presentation. Any questions? Okay, yep.
For the article groups, if you wanted to pick specifically like certain areas where to add the border,
yeah, could
you like add like a qualifier or something?
Yes. Oh, great question, AJ. Right, AJ?
Yep.
Let me translate that. Is there a way to target one article and not affect all articles? Like, what if you just want a big, fat 10px border dash bottom gray on your first article, But now look at this. I have big fat gray borders everywhere. Does anyone remember this from Code Academy? Did they get into this on the intro lessons? Any guesses on how you can target one article and not all of them?
It's either ID or class.
Class. Okay, ID or class. I'm going to talk about this in the second half, class. But you can go to your one article that you want to target specially. Like, hey, first article. I can put in a class, which is basically means name, a unique identifier. And I'm going to call this showcase. Showcasa. Sexier version of showcase. It's not Spanish for showcase. Don't repeat that. Save, refresh. Now, the style sheet, the browser doesn't know what to do with showcase. They're like, okay, Jeff, you just gave that article a special identifier. So if I come over here and do period showcase, and I just grab and I sneak and I take that border and put it into my special class, save, refresh, it only shows up on the bottom of my first special showcase class, and it doesn't put border on any of them all because those are just normal default articles, not an article with showcase applied to it. That's a little advanced, but we're getting to that in the second half. Other questions about what we were doing earlier? Other questions? All right, it's 7:08. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 7:18, maybe if I'm nice, maybe 7:19. All right.
It was called Edmund.
We are back. Took a little break, blew off some steam. A couple of you did a couple laps around the block. I can tell you're just stretched out. You're sweating a little bit. No, you're probably sweating because it's 60 degrees out and you're not used to it. And all of a sudden you just, woof, at least I was earlier. Okay, so we're going to get into page structure. This is round 2 of CSS. Normally I would finish the night on that note that we just finished on, just doing a little bit of typography, a little bit of spacing, and then call it quits. And I like to have people like kind of sit on that for a night. But we're going to just keep going, and you're going to chew on some stuff over the weekend. And let's get into page structure. In this little module, you're going to learn more about how to leverage SEO. You're going to learn about these new HTML5 elements that help you leverage SEO and even give you some more CSS styling opportunities. You're going to learn some specific CSS properties for page layout, and learn how to embed some extra little goodies into your website. Extra little goodies, who says that? I don't know, but we're going to get into Google Fonts and loading icons into our website so we can use them and style them and make a beautiful website. Okay, so leveraging SEO, here we go. I've been talking about SEO. SEO was one thing I used to not care about 10, 15 years ago when I was just beginning web design. I was like, meh, I'll just program and design, I'll make it pretty. That's what really counts. I'll make it pretty, I'll upload it, and you know what? Google will find it, it'll be there. People will use it, people will love it. That worked some of the time, but now with the internet, you know, circa 2018-19 here, it's a very competitive space. I was mentioning dentist websites or the Starbucks coffee websites. There's a lot of businesses in this little central downtown Syracuse area, and everyone's coming from their mobile device. Mobile traffic roughly represents 75 to 80% of the overall traffic for certain types of businesses. Okay, like coffee, food, and I can't think of other examples right now. If you look at the analytics of their traffic, it is like 90, 95% mobile. You're not opening up your desktop computer and be like, what coffee do I want today? Okay, some of you might, but the majority of you are opening up your smartphone since it's so easy. So you want to plan SEO things in parallel with how you're coding and how you're styling. It's not an afterthought. Next week, when we learn responsive web design, that's another parallel thing you want to bake into your entire process. None of these things are afterthoughts. They're parallel thoughts. Okay, so to improve your SEO, you can now use a main element. A main element identifies the main content of your entire website. Okay, without the main element, 10 years ago, Google would have had to figure out what is the main content of this website. But now if you wrap main around all your juicy content, that is the important content of your page, it will elevate the value of that content. So let's do this to our code. The main content of the HTML document is, okay, it's in the body. You think body is the main content, but no. The Starbucks logo, which is kind of hard to look at right now. The Starbucks logo is all messed up. I'm just going to clean up my HTML just a little bit. Hold on for a second. Bear with me here. I'm just going to clean this up so you can see starting pieces and closing pieces without too much work. Okay, so the logo upstairs is kind of like branding. It's not necessarily the main content. It's not unique content. This logo is going to be on every single page on this hypothetical Starbucks website. The main content really begins before the H1. The H1 is your page title. That's where you open up the main element. And where do you think main closes? Where do you think main closes? I opened it.
After H1?
No. Keep going, keep going. After each one, after all the articles, because the articles are main content. That's, yeah, I want Google to look at all these articles. Keep going, keep going. Before the body, yeah. Okay, yeah, exactly. So then I often will just take all my children, all my article children, look at my article children, and tab in all my beautiful children. Here's another tip in VS Code. Look how annoying that was to go all the way down my articles and all the way back up my articles. You can collapse. You can collapse code. Watch this. These little plus sign, minus signs, collapse. Look at these little minus signs. I'm collapsing my articles. My content is still in there. It's just VS Code is collapsing the space. So when I have a lot of redundant content, like these articles, I like to close them. And it will save you scrolling time. You can also close the entire main element. Look at open or close main, open main, etc. So you might want to close them. And I'm going to get rid of the showcase thing so that we don't get confused. We're not there yet. That was just a little demo from that question before our break. And I'll get rid of the fat 10 pixel border, replace it with 1 pixel border. Booyah. Okay. So articles and the main element. You just identified the main content of your entire website. Google's like, woo, I thought it was the main content, but now you just explicitly told me all the articles are in there. Now, unfortunately, my slideshow kind of goes out of order. I wrapped the main element around all the articles, and this slide just says you need to make sure you have articles. Now I have 10 articles inside the main content. All those 10 articles are equal to each other value-wise. All of them all have H2s, which I forgot the H2 on this slide. H3 for price, P for the description. All right, let's really boost the SEO, and that's by adding a few extra meta elements to our head section. The next meta element that I want us to do is called the description. And let's go upstairs and I'll explain what the description is. And I like to bundle my meta elements together, so I'm going to hit return after meta character set, Unicode 8-bit. And I'm going to put in a new meta element, name equals. I'm going to stare at that for 2 seconds. Did I just type that correctly? Do I have meta? Do I have name? And also meta elements need content. And I'll explain what content is in 1 second. This is the syntax for a raw meta element. The name is the identifier. What is this meta element actually modifying? What's the name of the property, the meta property here that we're changing and describing? Oh, we are changing what's called the description. And the content, think of that as the value of the description. And this is where a short summary of the website or page goes. A short summary. When I hit save and I come back to the browser and I hit refresh, nothing happens. Nothing happens. I don't see this is where a short summary of the website goes anywhere in the body, because 1, it's up in my head section, but 2, this is not for the end user. This is for a search engine. So when Google scans this website, it'll take the description and put it into its memory. And in my slideshow, I gave us a description here. Starbucks uses the highest quality coffee as the base for its espresso drinks. Learn about our unique coffees and espresso drinks today. I did not write that myself. Okay. Guess what? If I go to Google, if I open up a new tab and I just search for Starbucks, enter, there it is. This. The gray text under a search result, this gray text I've highlighted in blue, that's the meta description of any website out there. So when you see, when I scroll down to other search results, it'll either be the meta description, or if they don't have a meta description, it'll start to just grab the first chunk of the main content, which can always be awkward. But if I look at other ones, these are specific meta elements. So if I go to Starbucks.com, the real website, and open up the source code. All the source code, look at all the source code. Oh my God, don't ignore it right now, but if I do a Command F for description, look at that, right there, meta. Now they have the attributes in a different order. They have content come first and a name come second. That's because they ran this code through a minifier, an organizer, And it just alphabetized the attributes, that's all. Content, and C of content comes before N of name. But that's what displays on a search result. If you don't supply a description like this, then I was mentioning, Google will go down into your main content and try to find some juicy content for that search result, and it often does a terrible job. And when you see a terrible summary, pretend you're the end user. If you see a terrible summary, where am I going back here? Going back. If you see a terrible summary like 2 DeWitt shopping plazas expanding, blah, 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 and you see just the first fragment of an article, that fragment doesn't always give you the details about what this article is about. It's the first paragraph. Usually in journalism, your first paragraph is about setting up the scene, setting up the background syntax, not syntax, but the background context, if you will. It's not always the perfect overview. So it's bad user experience not to provide a meta description. And since Google uses the description, it loves the keywords inside it. Look at also how, look at, I searched for Starbucks. It automatically bolded the keywords inside the meta description that applied to it. So if I just Google search Starbucks espresso beverages, okay, yeah, I get a rich snippet, but if I come down, I don't know, like sometimes I don't know, what, do they write this themselves, or is it picking up things from the menu? Or espresso beverages, Starbucks Coffee Company, the foundation of our lattes, blah, 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 blah. It starts to bold out the keywords. So Google loves the keywords found inside the summary. So on that dentist website that it worked on, we all wrote, I had the content editor write nice descriptive summaries that described all the different dental services. And we put them in there invisibly into the template, up into the head section, and before you know it, whew, search results went way up to page 1 of search results, among the other things I was doing. The next meta element that I want us to do, and hey, by the way, look at this. I'm getting sick and tired of typing out meta name equals something, content equals something. Type out the word meta. Type out the word meta and hit tab. Okay, that didn't work. Never mind. Meta, drop down, didn't work. Okay, you're going to have to type out meta yourself. Meta, name equals something, and content equals something. That's usually the framework, sorry, the syntax for the raw meta tag. I know character set, UTF-8, it does not match that syntax, but all other meta elements do this. This meta element is called keywords. And this is where you put a comma separated list of all the associated keywords. Now, don't get too excited. Don't think this is the magical meta element that's going to connect you to 1 million visitors a day because of people searching for coffee and espresso and Starbucks. This worked maybe 15, 20 years ago when the internet was first being put together. People started to abuse meta name equals keywords. Okay, they started putting in fake keywords just to attract attention. If you remember, I don't know, 2000, 2001, 2002, when standards were first starting to be formed about what the internet was really going to be, more important than this little young thing from 1994, 1995. Pornographic websites used to take their meta tags and put in important keywords like the government, White House, the president, or something. Like important words that high schoolers were searching for their research papers. The 3 branches of government, judicial, legislative, executive. Okay? Little Johnny in high school in the library was just trying to do his or her research paper and was ending up on pornographic websites. Little Johnny grew up in one day, started to see some things that he was not ready for. So Google had to respond and be like, a lot of people are abusing this for bad reasons. Google said we're no longer valuing any of these keywords. But I would argue there's other search engines out there that are like, we kind of like them. I don't know if you still use Bing. Anyone use Bing? Alta Vista, Yahoo, all these things from many, many other years ago. They may use the keywords. But so Google says we don't use them, but I would even say Google might even use them at like a very, very, very little level. It just might help them become aware of possibly the keywords that are associated with this website. But if you read the fine print on Google and SEO, they have many pages about this, and they'll put it in bold. We don't, because of the spam, because of the abuse, we don't value this. But doesn't mean other things don't use it. Cool? All right. Meta description, meta name equals description, meta name equals keywords. If I go to starbucks.com, you're going to see keywords. In that slideshow, I have some. But if I go back to the source code, and right underneath it, look at this, right there, look at Starbucks, Starbucks Coffee Company, Starbucks.com, Starbucks Corporation, Starbucks, singular. Just in case we all make typos, it picks it up. So you never know. It's kind of fun to look at popular websites and see what they came up with for their own associated keywords. And they change based on what page you're viewing. So if I go to the menu page, I might see a different set of. So this is like an umbrella set of keywords that Starbucks is trying to push. But I think it's just there as a backup to reinforce the keywords, but it's not going to boost or jack up your SEO value. Okay, another element that you can use in HTML5 is called the header element. Oh, by the way, sorry, meta elements are not HTML5. They've been around since the very beginning of the internet. They're just normal HTML. But header, on the other hand, is an element that typically contains your branded elements, your logo, your slogan, brand pieces, redundant pieces that you would find on any website out there. This tells a browser that any of this content, like the logo, any of this content inside the header, you're gonna find this on every single part of every single page in this expansive hypothetical website. So please don't index it as the main content. So there's a difference between the header element and the main element. Main element, super important. Header element, secondary, important on the value. So Google will go in there and start looking around for a logo, for a slogan, for maybe an H1 with the business name, possibly. But it just starts to associate it with the brand pieces. So let's go into our demo, and wrap the header element around the logo. That's why I left the main element down below, because the header element is going to have the task to identify the branded elements. Header is different than head. Okay, and I often I bungle that a lot. Some of my students have gotten confused from that. But wait a minute, there's the head upstairs, but then there's the header in the body area. And yes, they're very close to each other. Header is different than head. Head is the brains. Header is the branded parts. Usually the top banner of your website. Your top banner is usually your logo and your nav and all that fun stuff. Question?
Where's your name?
Main is right there. So if I collapse, you can see header up top, main down below. These are collapsed, sorry. Header right now just contains the logo with a hyperlink. And the main contains all sorts of stuff. Oh my God, the main has my 10 articles and my H1 element with the page title. Questions about header? Well, header can be stylized. You can go into your style sheet and you can say, hey, header element, I'm going to make you background color teal. Oh, it's going to look beautiful. Teal. And I'm going to add padding-top 10px and padding-bottom 10px just to give you a little space around this logo. Oh, look at that. That just makes my eyeballs water. I encourage everyone, when you learn CSS, just put in silly colors, marker, crayon box colors. Don't get dialed into a specific style. Just prove that you understand how things work, how things are changing. I would never do body background color white to test, because the default color of your body is already white to begin with, thanks to Chrome. Okay, so if you do background color white on top of white, you're not going to know if things are working. So I often put on silly colors as long as possible. And then when it's time to get serious and hone in on the adapting the real style, the real design, then I get into the specifics. Header, look at, I can see over here in the top left corner, there's 10 pixels above that logo and there's 10 pixels below that logo because the header is a parent wrapped around the child logo, the child image. You're going to hear me use that metaphor a lot, parent-child. It refers to nesting elements within other elements. So header is like a little mini parent wrapped around the anchor element with the image child inside that. Body is a giant parent with a header child and the main child. And then there's grandchildren. And there's grandchildren inside that. It's not good. I don't get too crazy with that, but if you just can think of parent and child relationships, you'll go very far with all this. Usually below or sometimes inside a header is your navigation bar. You can put it inside or outside, doesn't matter. But it's the nav element. And typically you'll have a bunch of links inside the nav element. If you didn't have the links in the nav element, you might have had it in your main element or somewhere else. And Google would have to figure out whether or not these links are main content or not. But by putting that content, all the links, the navigation in a nav element, Google knows, whoa, okay, this is redundant. It's like the header. You're gonna find this on every single page of the website. Don't archive this as the main content. Just for demo purposes, let's put in a blank nav element. And just say nav goes here for right now. Nav goes here. We're not going to get into navigation tonight, but we will get into it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. You can stylize the nav element. The nav, look at it, I squeeze the nav between the header and the main. 3 lines. Nav opens up, nav goes here, nav closes. You can stylize it just like the header. I'm going to choose a different background color. I'm going to do green with a little space above and space below. Oh, sexy, I know. Yep, yep. Oh, I'm also, while I'm here, I'm going to do color : white. That means any child content inside this nav region, this nav element, is going to be white. Am I going too fast? Can you see the screen, back row? Yep. When we flip to HTML? What's that?
The color, it's for the letters?
It's for the inside content. So where it says nav goes here, the child content, that's what changes. Kelly, how's it going over there? Good? Working? Oh, beautiful. Nice. Don't tweet that. Don't Instagram that. Don't show that off to anyone. They're gonna ask you. They're gonna do a wellness check with you. The police are gonna come up to your house and ask you what's going on, which is okay. Talk to them. Okay. What else? What else? What else? Okay. Moving on. So the nerds and the geeks of the W3C and the browsers and just the general community, they got together and they came up with these elements, the header element, the main element, the nav, so that they can start to delineate the value of the content found inside it. They can start to assign the right kind of value. This is header stuff. Google, don't look at it too strictly. This is navigation. It's going to have a lot of links. These aren't keywords. They're just links. Main element. Oh, Google, this is the main content of the entire website. Okay. Before we had these elements, we had divs, DIVs, and I'll talk about them in just a little bit, but they're ambiguous. They're just boxes. Google will then have to go in and into every one of these average boxes and figure out whether the content is valuable or not. So now these elements do the job for us. There's the aside bar, the aside element. Aside really means content that goes to, or tangentially, but to the side of the main content. It's secondary content. And typically in your aside, you put in extra links, extra page links, advertisements, banner ads, promo boxes, maybe maps, this stuff that it pertains to their main content, but is not as important as the main content. So if you think about, if I had a cafecubal.com or starbucks.com, my menu would be in the main element, but the sidebar might be business hours. It might be a coupon code for something. It might be a Facebook little module or a little Twitter module showing the recent tweets. It's just extra filler stuff to show you more stuff about this company website, but it's not the main content that I want Google to index the content for. Let's go ahead and put in the aside after the main element at the very bottom. Main element, here comes the aside. And for tonight, we're not getting too much into this, but we're going to say sidebar stuff goes here. Secondary content, it's important, but it's not really important. Google is going to value everything in the main element so much more important than the aside. And we'll stylize it in 1 second, but I'm going to keep going. What do you think the last element at the very bottom of your website is called without me advancing the slide? Footer, yeah. And the footer is where the fine print of the website goes, the copyright, the legal statement, privacy policies. Sometimes even another navigation should go into your footer. Often websites, they'll have fancy navigations up in the nav element, you know, drop downs and slide outs and fancy things. But you'll see down in the footer element, they'll just spit out the navigation in a full-blown format, albeit smaller typography, smaller links, but you'll see a broader overview of the entire website down in the footer. It's like a catch-all, it's an extra space to repeat all of the links so that Google and your user really understands your site structure. But for right now, let's just put in copyright 2019, Starbucks Coffee Company after the footer. By the way, in VS Code, if you know your element, I talked about this a couple nights ago, but if you know the element, you can just type out the element and then hit tab, and it builds it for you. Copyright info goes here for right now. Placeholder stuff. Questions about that? Yep.
Is that in the aside?
No, it's on the outside. Still in the body. Whoop, sorry. Still in the body, but on the outside of the aside. So in your average looking website, like your average blog, if you will, you have your main column that has all the blog posts, and then the sidebar you usually have a post archive or advertisements or links to other websites. This is extra filler stuff that's not super critical to a search engine. It's important to the end user, but it's not important to a search engine. All we're doing right now is just elevating content value and devaluing content value. We're telling Google this is important, not important. The user, we can still stylize aside and footer. We can still make it look important, but now Google knows what's important and what's not important. Question, yeah?
Back to your page again, the Starbucks page was actually...
The HTML document?
Yeah, my nav is on top.
Okay, that might mean, did you, I'm just going to collapse this. Right here, did your nav come second and your header come first? The order does matter. The browser will paint the body or paint all these elements in the correct order from top to bottom.
Oh, I put my nav inside the header.
Okay, and that can work too, but let's just keep them separated for right now. Everyone with me so far? This is a good pace. Getting some educational traction, smoke. Okay, so these elements, they can also be stylized. So there's some CSS are associated with some of these elements. Like on this slide, I can take the header element and say, hey, header element, I want you to be 100% of the available space in the browser, but I'm going to give you a specific height, maybe of 150 pixels. I'm going to fill you with a background color orange. Nav, same thing. And we're kind of doing this already with background teal, background color green, but we weren't using width and height. I was just using padding dash top, padding dash bottom. So you can do either. You can put in any kind of CSS. So let's get in the habit of declaring width 100%. Now let me put a little big note after width 100%. By default, all of your elements are going to be width 100% without me even typing this out. Notice teal already goes 100% of the available space, and background color green of the nav already goes, yeah. But when we get into responsive web design, sometimes we'll fiddle and change the widths of our certain blocks. So it's nice to be always aware of what's going on width-wise or height-wise of your various blocks. And I'm going to say height 150 px of header. Save, refresh, and it expands the space a little bit. Technically, it's 150 pixels plus 10 plus 10. Grand total 170 pixels. So padding goes on top. It gets added onto the existing height, or width, if you will. But since I specified top and bottom of padding, it's affecting height. Same thing with nav. I'm going to almost do the same thing. Width 100%, height 50 px. Save, refresh, and you're going to notice just a little bit of an expansion.
Oh, pixels instead of percent.
Aha, yeah. Eva, Eva made a typo where she took the width and just by habit, she typed out width 100 px. Save, refresh. Ah! Look at the nav. I do it a lot. And when I see that, I love it though. I see it and it tells me, oh, I did something to the width. What did I do to the width? And then you look closely and you read your own code. Width colon 100 what? 100 no, percent, not pixels. Boom. Save, refresh. You're going to make those typos. Question?
So my logo and my nav are all overlapping.
Okay. You said your header and your nav are overlapping each other. Did you remove the nav and put it on the outside of the header? Definitely. Okay. Another thing that could be happening is, I don't know, let me go look over your shoulder. Questions? Problems? Good, good, good. Okay. What a mess. What a mess. Look at this mess. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
That yellow alone wakes me up.
I know. That's what I'm trying to do. It's all brainwashing.
That way.
Next slide. There's more CSS. We can do main versus aside. Look at these properties. Main width 70%, aside width 30%. If you do the math, ooh, they add up to 100%. They should display side by side. And I have a new property called min height. So let's go down to after nav, but before the H1, let's declare something about the main element. And I'm going to say, hey, main element, you're going to be width 70%. You're going to be minimum height of 500 pixels. And you're going to be a silly background color. Well, not silly, it's just going to be white for right now. I am after nav. I am adding width 70%.
Okay.
In a silly background color, white for right now.
What's the difference, or I guess the impact of doing 100% versus the 50?
The nav, 50px is the height, 100% is the width. And right now I'm saying, hey nav, just be as wide as you possibly can. But 50 pixels, I don't want you to be 100% height. I want you to be height, a small bar. So it's a small, just width versus height.
Well, if you do it by percent versus pixel, will it change based on your browser?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's instead of doing 100%.
So what she was just saying, if I do width 75% for the nav and come back, refresh, look at that, nav is now 75% of the available space, width-wise, not height. I'm locking in 50 pixels to be the green height, because I don't, watch what happens when I do height 100%, save, refresh. It's actually 100% of the content inside it. It doesn't work the way that you would expect it to, and I'll talk more about that when we get into it. So I like to lock in a pixel value for the height.
So percentage is relative, like more dynamic. And
Yes. Just height doesn't work the way that you expect it to with percentages.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, hey, nav, be as wide as you possibly can until the end of the browser, the edge of the browser.
So like if you left it at 75 and then you extended that, it would
Yeah,
longer,
okay.
but still only 75%.
Come back. Refresh.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Don't do this, but
Why not?
So the
Great.
percent aren't the full web page, just
100%
section.
of, okay, so just width only. Hey, width, be as wide as you possibly can of the browser. That's all.
So how do you know, like, if I put in 100% for the height of something in the body, it's not going to take the whole
Okay, so yeah, through experience, through the hard way, if you put height 100%, you're going to learn, you're going to see that height is treated differently. It's not 100% of the browser. It's you're never going to do this, height 100%. To be exact, if you do make a box 100% of your body, there's a unit called viewport height. I'll talk about this next week. It's a responsive term. But watch what happens. Psh. Jesus. Yeah. Praise Jesus. Got a large nav. For whatever reason, Jesus came out of our mouths when we did nav. 100% of the viewport height. Let's not do that.
Too much.
Too much nav. Okay? We'll do viewport heights next week. All right, so look at, okay, main, 70% of the available space of the width space, minimum height of 500 px. What that means is, hey browser, give me a box, give me a main element that's at least 500 pixels, but if I have more content that needs to go beyond the 500 pixels, the minimum will expand with it. So you see right now, beyond 500 pixels. Watch what happens when I switch that. Don't do this, but watch. Watch what happens when I say, no, main, I want you to be height 500 pixels. That's height 500 pixels right there in white. Height is not flexible. Height is fixed. Anyone paying attention to me? Yes? Okay. Okay. Eat your fruit. Eat your fruits. Anyways, height is not flexible. Minimum height, if you're working with a column box and you know it's going to be sometimes tall, sometimes small, sometimes tall, make it minimum height so it can adapt to more content. And if you don't have enough content, well, I could make it minimum height 5000 px. Don't do this. Save, refresh. Yeah, it's nice, 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 nice. Oh my God, I don't have any more content, but it's 5,000 pixels tall. It's waiting for some overflowing content, so let's not do that. 500 px for right now, just for our sample website that we're working on, is a good starter. And then the actual value is probably like 1,500 pixels tall if you add it all up. Let's scroll down to aside, and I'm going to park the aside after my P element. Sorry, my P selector, my paragraph selector. Not article, sorry, aside, different A word. Here comes the aside. Look at it, I'm scrolling all the way down after my paragraph style and say, hey aside, I want you to be 30% of the available space. I want you to be background color aqua, fancy color for blue. And minimum height of 500 px as well, min height 500 px. And while we're here, since we're here, we're going to talk about the footer. Hey footer, I want you to be with 100%. Oh, here's a little bit of a height, a little bit of a background color, and that's it. Aside and footer. Oh, this is a beautiful website. People are going to be jealous. Okay, you're going to show this to other people, and you're going to be they're just going to be impressed. They're going to want your autograph. They're going to give you money. They're just going to give you money. They're not going to ask for you to do any jobs. They're just going to give you money. No cost, yeah. So I dabbled in web design in high school, just for a little bit with some friends. I talked about GeoCities, okay? So one summer day when I was bored with my friends, we built a little sample website. I put content in there. I made it funky colors. Didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was so proud of what I was doing, okay? And my bubble popped when I invited my mother over. I'm like, Mom, come here, sit down, look at this website. Browse around, navigate, but look at this. And some vein in her forehead popped. Just something cringed, just like, what is this? What am I looking at? Well, one, it was the internet. It was young. It was 1998, if you will. Your parents at the time didn't know what that was, didn't know how to use it. But visually, it was hard to look at. So just because you have colors in your website does not mean it's usable or even friendly or anything. Okay, so I teach graphic design at the university, and I hold back as far as possible before I teach color theory or choosing new typefaces. Okay, I often work with black and white, shades of gray maybe, and if I do have to bring in a color, it's for an accent color, for a brand color. So if I was doing a website for Starbucks, I would use green as an accent color on a button, maybe on a special headline, maybe an icon somewhere. But I'm not going to have green painted on the body background color. I'm not going to hit someone with that loud color. I'm going to reserve it for special purposes. And you'll realize you can do a lot of design with just white and black, because it forces you to rely on your layout, your spacing, your visual hierarchy, big things, small things, medium things, the order, all these things that you'll eventually learn in other modules. All right, save, refresh. Now look at this. Now wait a minute. Sidebar. Aside, you're supposed to be where my mouse is hovering. Sidebar, where are you? What? Sidebar, what are you doing down there? You belong up there. Okay, this goes back to last night. What did I tell you about elements last night? What does the browser do by default that you see right now? It starts from top to bottom, and it doesn't know that you want things side by side, so it's just going to put things in a single column, regardless if the box even takes up the entire column. You think the aqua box would know to go up next to the white box, but it's because the browser assumes that everything is a giant block. And when I say a giant block, if I right-click Inspect Element, and I hover over the aside and hover over the main, look how it shades, it highlights everything in orange going all the way across there. Okay, it's saying that aside, even though it's only using 30% of the available space, it still has access to 100% of that entire row going all the way across. Main, yeah, you're 70%, but you have access all the way over. Everything is a block, even though the interior content, interior background color, if you will, only takes up a certain percentage. We're going to control this in the future a little bit. So sometimes when you get into columns, they don't work the way that you expect them to. And this brings us into more problem, another CSS property, another problem to solve. And this is what it looks like. Ah! So we need to solve it by putting in a row that wraps around the main and the side. And this row is going to tell the browser that the children inside this parent row needs to be subdivided, subdivide the space. Now, what is a row? A row is not an element. There is no HTML5 row element. There should be. Okay, I should mail my congressman a little letter about rows being an HTML5 element. It'll probably look like a crazy ransom letter that I'm sending a congressman. Anyways, a row is going to look like this. Let me just zoom in a little bit. A row is going to be a div element. Div stands for division. Stands for really a box, an ambiguous box that's being placed on your website. This is your default element. If you don't know, if you've already used header and you've used nav for the nav, and you have main, aside, and footer, and if you have anything else and you don't have the HTML5 element to grab and use, well then you use a div and you give it a unique name with the class attribute. Div class equals row. And I'm going to wrap this around the main and the aside. And the browser will then know to subdivide the child space. Well, let's just see how this works. Let's first go to HTML. Let's collapse the main element and collapse the sidebar. And watch this. Here comes div. Now, I'm just going to type out the word div. And I open things back up. I don't know why, but whatever. And then go after aside. Careful, things pop open a little bit when you click into them. And close the div. I can't just keep it like this because you potentially are going to have many, many, many divs on your website. They're the generic element that represents a block, a box. That's why the people who programmed HTML and CSS built the class attribute. The class attribute gives it a unique name, so you're not stylizing all divs at the same exact time. You're giving them unique names. It's almost like if there was an element called human. We're all human in here. We're all the human elements. But if you wanted to give someone a green sweatshirt or a yellow shirt or a teal sweater or something, then you might do class equals Caitlin, class equals Eva, etc. Class is what will make them different a little bit without being too special about this. So div class equals row. I can now talk to this row class in my style sheet, but let's see what happens. Save. Drum roll. Oh, Firefox, get out of here. Firefox, get out of here. Drum roll, save, refresh, boom. Nothing happened. Why didn't anything happen? I'm kind of disappointed. Why? Fundamentally, what didn't work? Look at my main is still upstairs and my sidebar is still downstairs. And rows there, I can see my inspection palette. The browser is staring at me, being like, "Okay, Jeff, you made a box. It's called row. What in the hell do you want me to do with it?" Okay. CSS, exactly. The browser is waiting for you to define what happens with a row. So I'm going to put the row before the main element because it kind of starts before the main element. But you can't just do this. Can't just do this. Look at it. Don't type it. Don't type it. Look at this. Why is this bad? Without knowing too much about this. Why is this bad?
Because the row is a class.
Row is a class. It's not an element. If I left it like this, the browser would be assuming that there's the row element somewhere in this document, and it's not. So if you have a period, then the browser knows, okay, that's probably a class attribute value. Class equals row. It's equivalent of saying this, but you can't type it out like this. Class equals row. No, the period represents the class attribute. And the property that we're going to use is called display flex, as in it's going to adopt a flexible layout, a side-by-side layout, not a block layout. Blocks means, like I was showing you, that 70% main was still taking up 100% of the available row. The sidebar was 30%, but it was still taking up the block space. Now with this flex will take the children and make them display side by side. Display flex makes the child elements, the first layer of child elements, display side by side. It doesn't affect the grandchildren, it doesn't affect the articles, it doesn't affect the H3 price and the P tag for the description, doesn't affect those. It's just the first children within the row get subdivided. So it takes the 70% of main, it takes the 30% of sidebar and puts them next to each other. Anyone notice anything else happened visually? Yo, sidebar, why are you so tall? Sidebar, I said minimum height of 500 px. So display flex will take the tallest child, the main, and force the sidebar to adapt that height. It's trying to distribute the space and take the tallest child and evenly distribute them between the two children, if you will, the two columns. Most of the time that's really nice, because if you didn't, then you might see a short sidebar with a really tall main column, and it won't look uniform. Okay? So that's display flex. If you just want to have two boxes display next to each other, two columns in this case, you gotta have a parent with display flex. So it just tells the children to go side by side. We'll practice this a few more 1,000 times throughout the next couple weeks. Always refer back to this slide about flexing, about what does the parent look like. Oh, it's wrapped around main and a side. It's called div because there is no row element. It's a div element. And then in CSS, we put in display : flex, a period because it's coming from a class attribute, not an element. There's a whole guide about Flexbox, and don't go to it right now, but go to it in the future and read more about all these little flexy things you can do with your layouts. Let's keep it simple. Don't click on that link right now. But there's a lot of guides out there that talk about Flexbox. It is a display flex came out, I don't know, 2014, 2015. It was a replacement for another older CSS property called float. I am not going to even show you float until maybe you're advanced or something, but it's a very old way of doing layouts. Then Flex took over and has ruled the land for the last 5 years of CSS. It's really nice, very easy. Look how easy that was. With float, it required many more lines of code to get the side-by-side action. But now, as of 2018, 2019, there's a new layout structure coming out, and that's called CSS Grid. Have you ever come across it? Free Code Camp or codeacademy.com. CSS Grid is the newer standard, but the only thing holding back CSS Grid is not all the browsers read it or adapt it. It's not standard yet. It's about to become standard. So like your newer browsers, like if you just install Google Chrome right now, it reads Grid, but your browser, your user that has a slightly older version because they don't hit update from time to time, that won't use Grid. So I would say in the next year, it'll be almost safe to just start using Grid. But Grid requires a few more lines. It is cooler, has more options, but it requires a few more configuration lines, and you'll get to that when you're more advanced. Okay, there's a little problem in our layout. The browser is putting default margins around headlines and even around the damn website. Anyone see this little yellow going all the way around my website on the outer rim? It's like, wait a minute, like where's this coming from? I didn't define a margin, and then where's all the space above an H1 and below an H1 and above an H2 or below an H2? Where's that all coming from? That's coming from the browser. The browser assumes that you don't want the content to touch the very edge of your browser. It assumes you don't want content to touch other headlines. It's trying to give you some default spaces. And you know what, browser? I am a creative professional. I want to control my own spacing. So what we need to do is reset the space. Now, this bothered me so much about 10 years ago. I didn't know the browser was inserting default margin. Like right now, if I just inspect element and I go to my body and I click the body element, it highlights everything. But if I look closely at the CSS, yeah, body background color yellow, that's coming from my style sheet, but then body display block margin 8px coming from user agent style sheet. When I first discovered that, I was like, where the hell is this coming from? Like, I didn't put this in there. I didn't know what user agent style sheet meant. That means your browser style sheet. So I used to go into my CSS and say, body, what the hell are you doing? I need to go in here and say, no, bad body, margin 0, save, refresh. Boom, gets rid of the yellow space. And then I have to go to my H1 and say, hey, don't do this. Don't type any of this. Hey, H1, you, margin 0. Why am I talking like a caveman? You, fire, margin 0. Collapse the space. Hey, H2, you, margin 0. Anyone see any like redundancy here? Like, oh my God, how many times do you have to type out margin 0? This gets old fast. And then p tags, margin 0. And potentially other elements I'm not completely aware of. Okay, this is not dry. This is repetitive. This is redundant. So I'm going to click undo 1,000 times. Control Z, by the way. And what I used to do after I did that 1,000 times was I would go upstairs to my code. Don't do this. And I would do this. Multiple selectors. You can have multiple selectors, all have margin 0. Oh, forgot the body. Comma separated list. Save, refresh. Does the same thing. I just killed 8 birds with one stone, so to speak. Okay? But that even got old after a while. I kept typing that in every single new project, and I'm like, oh my God, is there a better way of doing this? And a nerd / geek out there by the name of Eric Meyer, circa 2011, 2012, Eric Meyer put together a file called CSS Reset. And what he did was he got tired of it too, and he created the mega block. The mega block, look at this, HTML, comma, body, comma, div, comma, span, comma, H1 through H6, paragraph, comma, all these other elements you may or may not even use in your document. One curly brace set, margin 0, padding 0, border 0, flush out the fonts, flush out vertical align, and close. And then he did some other things that help reset things back to 0. And we started to put this in all of our documents just to reset all the defaults so that we have complete custom control over our websites. Well, then the geeks got together and they're like, you know what, we got to do better. We got to do something called normalize.css. It's more geared towards HTML5. Eric Meyer did a little HTML5, but it was around 2011, 2012. That's right when HTML5 was coming out. So the geeks have formally put together normalize.css. And if you hit download, it's a bigger document with all sorts of notes. These are notes. These are invisible comments, but then HTML, some default settings, body, look at margin 0, main display block, H1 with some defaults, HR, horizontal rule with some defaults, etc. So what I often do is I select all, I copy, Control C. I don't paste. Oh my God, watch what happens when I paste. Where's all my stuff? Oh my God, all this stuff just went in here. Where's my code? 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 Line number 355. There's my body background color and my beautiful children underneath there. So don't put normalize into your style sheet. You're going to waste 300 lines of code and make it very hard to get to your styles. Where do you think I'm going to put these styles for normalize? Any guesses? In another style sheets. Perfect. Here comes a new document. Paste. File save as. It's already in my CS. Whoop, hold on. It's already in my CSS folder. Let me just double check. I'm in Starbucks 2 CSS. I'm going to call it normalize.css and hit save. And then I'm going to hit refresh on my browser. Boom. Wait a minute, yellow is back. My spaces are back. Son of a bitch. Why is this happening? I didn't link it. Perfect. Caitlin, you get the little star sticker tonight. You got it. You're following along. This is good. Common sense. Just because you save this style sheet called normalize or bananas.css in your CSS folder doesn't mean the browser will know to put it in there. Now, I'm going to copy the style sheet link because I'm going to copy and clone it and just change out the word style to normalize. But am I going to put it up here or am I going to put it afterwards? Any guesses? Who votes for after? Who votes for before? Let's do before. Who votes for before? Who votes for after? Okay. One of the before people, explain why would I put it before?
As far as I'm thinking like if we loaded first.
Boom. Exactly. The browser reads this from top to bottom. Okay, I'm gonna make a terrible analogy. Anyone walk into a public restroom and the pig in front of you who used the bathroom didn't flush, and then you see stuff in the toilet, and before you use it, obviously you need to flush. Well, it's the same thing in this. You walk into this browser, you're like, no, I don't want the defaults. I need to flush the toilet. So the best place to put it is before. Here comes normalize.css. Flush the toilet, flush away the defaults, and then here comes my custom style sheet in second place. Cascading order. First happens, then second comes in, and like I illustrated before on a micro level, remember when I did two colors, brown and orange, which one worked? It's the thing that comes last. So our style sheet comes last. It has the ultimate cascading power. So it's like normalize, resets everything back to 0. Now when I hit save and refresh, I get rid of the yellow, the body margin, but I don't have control over the margins of my headings, because if you really look closely at normalize.css, it has margins for your H tags. It's putting in some basics, and that still, to this day, pisses me off. Okay, so what I still do in my style sheet, as annoying as it is, I take all my typography like this and just say margin 0. Save, refresh. I do a little mini reset at the very top of my style sheet, and then I can go down to my style sheet and now customize what I want my H2 margin top or margin bottom to be, etc. So let me back up 1,000 million steps. Let's get normalize into our browser. Open up a new tab and Google search normalize.css. Google search normalize.css. It is still a really nice reset file to use, a little better than Eric Meyer, but Eric Meyer reset the typography, but normalize resets all sorts of extra HTML5 elements, and it's a lot better. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. You use one, but you still got to take an extra step. Normalize is a complete standard. So anyways, click on the search result for normalize.css. You can read about it. Normalize.css makes browsers render all elements more consistently and in line with modern standards. It precisely targets only the styles that need normalizing. So the nerds and geeks have done some extra work. They've really honed in on what really needs to be changed. You click download. It doesn't download anything. It just shows you the contents of the normalize.css. So I'm going to select all. Command A, Command C. Open up a blank new file in VS Code. What's the keyboard shortcut for a new file? Command N, once you're in VS Code. New file, what's paste? Command V. Save file, save as. Yeah, Command Shift S, yeah, that's a little fancy, but yeah. Command Shift S. And what are we going to call this? You can call it anything you want to, but the proper thing to call it is normalize.css. Normalize.css. Save.
So you save it in the CSS?
Save it in the CSS folder. File, save as. Again, one more time. Pay attention to your folder directories. Yeah, you're in Starbucks 2, but running out of Zoom space here. Starbucks 2, CSS, and then normalize.css. Look at that. That's what you want, save. It's asking me to replace it because I already have it. Now, it's not going to work. It's not going to work until you link to it. And that's where you want to copy your first link and paste it in front of itself and change out the stuff. And I'm going to collapse this to single lines because 2 attributes isn't the end of the world. Bada bing, bada boom. Look at this. Look at that. Look how beautiful those 2 lines look next to each other. Style sheet. First style sheet comes in as normalize, flush the toilet. Second style sheet comes in, beautiful perfume. Just beautiful colors. Potpourri. Poopery. What? Who said that? Real mature. Okay. The order does matter. Top to bottom, the browser reads this. Ooh, keywords or character set. Boom. Meta. What's the first one up there? Meta description. Boom. That's not visual, so nothing gets painted into the browser for that. Keywords. That's not visual either. That's just baked in for Google. Title, kind of visual, but that's really the tab in your bookmarks in your history. Normalize. Whoosh, flush away the defaults. Style. Paint a beautiful picture, your own layout. Close the head, and then the body takes off. And the body then has a lot of visual content, the header, the nav, the main, the sidebar, the footer, and all the little children pieces inside that. Okay. Look at you guys. You guys are now, you can read this document from top to bottom, and you know exactly what every single line is doing. That's part of becoming a programmer. We didn't use a drag and drop WYSIWYG website builder like a Wix or a Squarespace or Adobe Dreamweaver or things I can't think of right now where it builds code for you. You're doing it yourself. You'll have more authoring control, more creative control or custom control over your websites. You can now even explain it to a stranger. Don't do that. They'll look at you weird. But you can explain to someone else exactly what every single line does. That is super important in programming. Okay, and then one more thing. I did a bigger block. On my own style sheet at the very top. I did it at H1 through H6 in a paragraph, margin 0. We'll take a few minutes break. It brings us to 8:30. We'll conclude in 3 minutes, and we'll talk about a homework assignment. Overload. Yeah.
Normalize is not in your CSS.
Yep.
I mean, so like technically, if you did images/normalize.css, it would work because it's in your images. Oh, no, it's not. It's in the Starburst folder. Sorry, but move it to CSS. Close this. Close this first. Save it. Just save your code. Okay. So close the
So what is that supposed to be inside of main?
You quit it. Then move this normalized into the CSS folder.
Questions, problems, beef jerky, anyone? Do you know what's going on? What's the problem?
I can't get my stuff to line, the sections to line up side by side.
Most platelets, and this is the reason why.
Okay.
It's because so this side is supposed to be in the row, so your main and aside
be right here on 118. You're closing the door to your first row before a side you can get up in that row. Now you're opening up a second row and putting in the side.
Oh, we weren't supposed to switch around the days and look at them.
Yep.
So, okay. So you get rid of that difference there. Oh, okay.
So now now the main is
Now,
So I had something.
Dina, this slide right here, one parent row,
it's here.
child main,
You can click it to
child
open it.
aside, close the row. What you did is like right after main,
I
close
clicked
one,
another one.
open another one with the
Right.
side, and then you close it.
Okay, yeah, I thought I heard
Cool.
two, but, okay.
So this is the next one.
And all of that yellow is gone. So now it's
Fix it?
Oh, no.
Huh? It's highlighted.
Oh, that's okay.
So you have the
Okay, I'm good.
That,
I just had to take out a div.
Is that it?
Yep.
inspect.
Looks like you normalized but that's fine.
Where?
Yeah, that's fine. You get the
Got a little happy with the divs there.
Got a little happy with the divs. When you have too many divs in your document,
There you are.
sometimes websites do that. We call it divitis. When you have too many divs within a div, within a div, within a div, within a div, and it's finally like you're 6 divs down,
Because you're scrolling.
it's like
and
sometimes
the
too many.
Actual background color is yellow, but then these are boxes on top of the background.
Yep.
All right. So I did not get to everything I wanted to do tonight, but we're going to conclude with your homework assignment for the week. Now, one thing I did not cover was embedding icons. So it's not critical towards the homework assignment, but we will, on Monday at 5:30, after we review the homework, we will do Font Awesome. However, if you do want to follow the instructions and maybe do a little head start, you can see how it works with 1, 2, and 3 down here. And I give an example, and I give you CSS. Now that you know what HTML is more, and you know what CSS is, you might even understand what the hell is going on in these two slides. I wanted to show you how to embed a font from Google Fonts. So I've been using Arial and Georgia tonight, and those are good. Those are web-safe fonts. Web-safe, as in every single person across the entire world, I think, has Arial and Georgia and Verdana and Tahoma and Times New Roman on their computers. That's web-safe. But you know, you want to make things look a little nicer than just bland old Arial in Georgia. However, I would argue I actually like doing more with less typefaces. So if you told me all I could use is Arial in Georgia, I would make the most out of those two typefaces before I would add in any extra fancy typeface. So anyways, Google bought the license to over 900, maybe 1,000 fonts at this point. They bought the licenses to all these, and they've now made all these fonts available for you to use in your own websites for free. You can Google search Google Fonts, or you can click on that blue link and it'll take you to it. And there's 2 instructions. You got to select what font you want, and then they produce a link element that you copy and paste into your head section. And then they give you the CSS property to use in your font family. It looks like this. Google will give you the second line right here. Look at link, hyperreference, fonts.googleapis.com/Roboto 400 700, the actual thing. It'll build you that. All you got to do is copy paste it. And then they give you the font family, Roboto, to use in your style sheets. It's as easy as those 2 steps. But I would encourage you, maybe poke around for yourself in Google Fonts. Select a font and follow the instructions that follow. They have the documentation. It is not rocket science. It is 2 steps. And now that you're familiar with HTML and CSS, you'll actually understand the instructions. One of the instructions is copy this link and put it into your head section. Oh, I know where the head section is in my document. I know what a link element is, etc. So follow that. But we'll cover it. We'll do it together on Monday. Your homework for Monday is to take a look at my Best Buy design. I gave you a mobile design just for Best Buy. It's on the presentations and files, but I'm going to open it up here. Get out of the way. It looks like this. Now, you're not going to be able to do some of it, but it has a header element with some children pieces in it. Maybe for Monday, since we didn't do font awesome icons or even a search bar, maybe you just put the logo in. You can do that. You did it with Starbucks. And then here comes a bigger image with a headline and a button. Okay, a button is an element. It's called button. And you can style it. You can put in your own text. After that, a headline, and then not coffee, but a product after that. Now, don't get caught up into the actual content. What I want you to do is when you look at layouts like this, I want you to do this mentally. I want you to think about regions. I want you to think about header, main, footer. There's no sidebar to this mobile layout, but it's just right now header and main, and the majority of it, and then footer at the bottom. But then once you start thinking about your regions, start to dive in mentally or in a piece of paper, sketch out the structure of one of those regions. Well, granted, I wanted to show you more of the children pieces inside that header, but at least you can sketch out where the header goes in one logo image, one little box for image. Scroll down in your sketch. Maybe sketch out, okay, here's an article element, and it's going to have an image, a headline, and a button element. Scroll down, and there's a headline. Sketch out the headline. Sketch out the article here, and then an image. Now, what I did not get time to show you is how to put a lot of pieces of content next to an image. Don't worry about that for Monday. Maybe you just put the content naturally under the image, much like our Starbucks demo right now. Don't worry about the side-by-side. But the side-by, what's going to help us with side-by-side? What CSS property? Row. Oh, that's a class. Display flex. But the image is one child, and we need a little extra box here so that it takes that child and that child and makes them side by side. But if I don't have a little extra box, it makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children display side by side. It's like too crammed. I'll show you that on Monday. I wanted to really demonstrate that tonight, but we didn't get time. And if you get this structure in place, but just do the old-fashioned structure, really it's then copy, paste, paste going down. And on the last page of this PDF, I've given you like the style guide, if you will. Like that main headline is Roboto Bold. Roboto is a font from Google Fonts. If you don't want to do Google Fonts, just use Arial Bold 28px. The button is 18 pixel font. The secondary headline is 24, and then I give you little pieces down here for the headlines and the paragraph settings. I give you the exact hex value to use up in the header background. It's background color hashtag 0046BE. And then this little headline is this special red. Well, there's the red color that you use for your color. If you see any gray values, like the gray footer, it's one of these gray values. Okay. This is what designers will give you in the future. They'll give you the view, the preview, the prototype, if you will. They won't give you a breakdown like this, like I am. I'm trying to, since I know a lot about code, I'm trying to give you the wireframe, the structure for it. Okay, and then I'll often give you a style guide with all the properties kind of like spit out. These headlines are in bold. I didn't get to show you, but in CSS you can make things bold with font weight bold. And then you can make things regular by saying font weight regular or font weight 300. There's a number system. Maybe you want to look up information about the font weight property or wait for Monday. So ignore everything in the header except the logo. I have given you the logo in the zip inside the Google Classroom. It's called bestbuy.zip. If you open it up, I have given you a project folder called Best Buy, and inside Best Buy folder there's an images folder with the SVG, with this main image, and the 3 little product images below that. That's all the assets. Everything else you need to code. So I want you to start from scratch. Download that zip, unzip it, take that Best Buy folder that I've given you and use that as your home base, your new home base. You need to add your own index.html. You need to then connect it to your own CSS file. You need to code out yourself the header element, the main element, the footer element, and then article inside that. There's a lot of parallels between our Starbucks assignment that we've been doing the last couple days and this. This just takes it up a notch, a little bit.
So where's the repository?
Presentations and files on module 1. And down the bottom of that, I think there's Best Buy PDF and Best Buy Zip. Okay, what do you think about this? Okay. I wish I had enough time to show you some sexiness up here, up in the header, but we will do that together. And then maybe you can think about how to have the image on the left and text on the right. The clue is in this. Okay. Here's the article. Here's the image, but I have a little box. It's a div box that's wrapping around H3 or H4 or I can't remember my H tags and the paragraph or something like that. It's just a little div box because there is no little HTML column box. It's article, image, div with a class called, I don't know, product right. You can make up your own name as long as it you assign whatever to it, and then H tags and P tags inside it. But your article is your parent. Your article is your display flex parent. So chew on that. Try to do it. Do it as best as you can, even if it's a complete mess. And I mean, if it's a complete mess. If it's a mess, bring in the mess. Do not bring in a blank document. Do not bring in this attitude of like, I tried it, but I messed up, so I just deleted everything and I waited until Monday's class. No. Bring in the epic fight. I want to see blood, tears, splatter all over this keyboard.
Can you improvise?
What's that?
Improvise.
Improvise. If you can't figure it out, then improvise. Yeah, sure, a little bit. Don't over-engineer it. Don't go down this rabbit hole of like figuring out advanced CSS or JavaScript or something that makes some of this magic happen. Just stay with kind of like stay in the realm of what we've been learning in this module. And make some mistakes. And this is real content that I got off of bestbuy.com today. So that's the current logo. They kind of like tweaked the logo lately, Best Buy. It's bigger, it's bolder, without the whole tag. The little tag is a little accent. This is the real headline. This is the real content, the real image. So don't go to bestbuy.com. I mean, you can go to bestbuy.com. Don't inspect it because I'm not matching the styles pixel perfectly, but it is there for reference nonetheless. You can, if you want to go to bestbuy.com and inspect the header, you can find the blue color for yourself, but like I said, I've given it to you on this page. It's that color. That's what I had to do. I went to Best Buy. I designed this I emulated the design. I laid it out in a design program. I put in the pieces, and then I went and inspected the colors and pasted in the actual colors. So this is real. This is not a fake website that Jeff just made up. I wish. I like to emulate, or I like to do real projects. You'll take too many classes, or maybe you've taken classes in the past where you do these fake projects, abstract projects that don't actually look like anything real, like the Starbucks project that we're doing tonight. Maybe also over the weekend, clean that stuff up, that Starbucks project up. Maybe dial back the crazy colors and start to put in the real colors. The real colors were all in that other PDF, in my presentation PDF for everything. Not page, it was a different one. Open recent, basic HTML and CSS. And cancel, but there's the second page of that PDF, third page. I forgot to include, there's a big image right here above the H1 headline. It's called showcase.jpg. If you look at these Starbucks images, it's a bigger image. Maybe put that in. Maybe turn off crazy colors. Maybe you start to look at margin top and margin bottom of header. Margin top of H1, margin bottom. Maybe look at the Starbucks green is being used for $3.99. For right now, just put color green. But Maybe go to starbucks.com and inspect the header or the nav and get the Starbucks screen and put it into their CSS for the H3. But anyways, clean it up a little bit, make it presentable. So if you do show it to someone, they'll be like, damn, that looks really nice. Not, they're gonna look at you like, what the hell did you sign up for? Okay, what the hell is Careers in Code? Are you okay? Do we need to reevaluate your life options? No. Also, this sidebar is going to stay next to the main until we fix it next week with more responsive stuff. Like that 70% main is going to stay next to 30% aside until we start to put in conditional styles. And we'll be doing that next week. What do you guys think of week 1? Week 1, off to a good start. Ramping up, finish on a good note. No tears, not yet. Wait until you get to your car, and you close the door, and you get in here, what did I sign up for? And you put your head on the steering wheel, and the horn goes off, and then you wake up. Questions? Yeah? Paul? Office hours. Okay, yeah, that's right. Jesse wanted to ask me about office hours. Now, Careers in Code wants the instructors to be available like 2-3 hours each week for some extra time. There's a couple options with that. Either I can make myself available on Slack for a given amount of time, or before class or after class or something like that, or we stay a little bit after class or before class or physically in this room, or we meet on a Friday, a Saturday, or a Sunday for a little fragment piece of time. But a lot of just like one-on-one kind of instruction. And if I can't make it, then the TA would step in and do it. So what do you think with your own schedules? Do you feel like there's a good day versus bad day about meeting? Like, how are Sundays, or how are Saturdays, how are Fridays, or how's before class, or how's after class?
I need that Friday break.
You need that Friday breather. Yeah, I agree.
She likes Friday.
Yeah, just get it over with, and then you have your week. You get 2 days break.
So this is obviously going to be very subjective about what's available, what's good for you. So I would say in the Slack channel for the student channel, maybe you message and you offer what would be a good time for you. Maybe we can kind of see what's going on and try to isolate a common time. Doesn't mean you have to attend, but it's just like a professor in office hours. Like, I'm not the type of professor though that just says, I'm going to be available on Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. I don't know what this voice is. This is an old-time professor. I've witnessed many office hours like that, and then the students on campus line up outside the door, and they stand in line for like 3 hours waiting their turn. I am not like that. I'm more of like by appointment, one-on-one. I want to work with someone for like 15 minutes to explain things, not have anyone wait out the door. So maybe we adapt an appointment kind of schedule, but for at least starting out, maybe it's a dedicated time on Slack on a certain day, on a Sunday or a Saturday or on a Friday. Maybe we can agree upon a time starting out.
And see, Friday, it would give us an opportunity to actually get some work done,
Yeah.
and then come with questions,
Yeah.
as opposed to, like you were saying, just get it over with. Like a lot of us work.
Okay.
during
On the
day,
flip side, what she's
there would be
saying is
nothing to get over
the
with.
stuff is fresh. It's in my memory. I want to act on it. I want to do it right now. You're saying I need to do some stuff. I need to swim a little bit and then bring in questions. So pros and cons to each. Okay, so post the message on Slack, or maybe put it in your survey as well for tonight's experience. Somewhere in the answer, the extra comments or something like that, maybe you put it there. Put it somewhere. And we'll, Jesse and I will get back to you. But we'd love to find a nice time so that all the instructors in the future, all the instructors can plan ahead and adapt for that time. So it's not just custom to Jeff Passetti. It's really, it's part of your rhythm of the week. And it's also coding stuff for the next 24 weeks. This is not something that you do Monday through Thursday and put down and don't revisit until next Monday. This is something that we expect you to do over the weekend a little bit. How many hours? I don't know, but there's probably like 4 or 5 hours on the outside of class. you're welcome to take a break. It's nice to relax like on a Friday or on a Saturday, but it's time to get to work on one of those days. So it's up to you guys. Think about it. Post the message. Please stay if you have any questions. If not, have a beautiful evening. Thank you for attending Module 1 of Careers in Code. I think we got off to a great start.